Welcome to OK Let's Talk. I'm your host, Rob, and today we're diving into the latest global reports from all around the world. And we aren't just watching the news, we're breaking down the history and the why behind the headlines to give you a deeper educational perspective. With all of that said, welcome to the stream, and let's get to the analysis. Educational commentary and analysis falls under Fair Use, Section 107.
And dozens were injured, and ambulances and civil defense crews can't access that area due to the proximity of the yellow line and the Israeli military firing at anyone who gets closer to that road, the Salah ad-Din road. The situation remains here dire, and the distraction.
Welcome everyone to the stream.
And Lebanon.
Welcome to the chat.
Only lift the situation here in the Gaza Strip to escalate more.
Does anyone think that the ceasefire is going to hold?
Ibrahim, just very briefly,
looks like it's already being violated. Israel is still bombing Lebanon.
You were mentioning earlier on, which happened back in October. Has there been a change of attitude, if you like, amongst the journalists who are working in and around Gaza regarded to their safety? Did they start to feel that there was less chance of them being targeted because of the ceasefire? Or are they using the same safety precautions that they had been using during the war?
From the recent attacks that were carried out by the Israeli military on journalists, there's no any kind of safety measures provided to Palestinian journalists. They were killed and massacred during Israel's war, and now they are being targeted constantly by the Israeli military. After the ceasefire took effect, like Palestinian journalists feel like they are a target to the Israeli military for just telling the truth.
Welcome, everyone.
Letting the world know what's happening here.
I see that the ceasefire is already being violated by Israel. And
here,
Iran has reshut the Strait of Hormuz.
Has risen to 262.
That's always great.
And not only during the war, but even after the ceasefire took effect, the Israeli military targeted multiple journalists while they were doing their jobs. Some journalists were trying to film by a drone in a very safe area, and they were targeted and brutally killed just for them to show the world the scale of devastation by a drone. And they were ended up being targeted in a ceasefire, and there's no any guarantee for Palestinian journalists to be targeted or not, whether during a war or a ceasefire that has been reached back in October 2025. They have been always and constantly been a target for the Israeli military for just telling the truth.
Ibrahim Al-Khalili in Gaza City, thank you very much indeed. It's just gone 17 GMT hours, and a reminder of our breaking news out of Gaza. Our colleague from Al Jazeera Mubasher, Mohammed Wisha, has been killed after his car was hit in an Israeli drone attack. It happened on the Al Rashid Street, or the coastal road that runs west of Gaza City. And we're going to discuss
Leave it to the Israelis.
In the studio. Paul Musgrave is an associate professor at Georgetown University in Qatar. He's a U.S. foreign policy analyst. Daniel Thafer is the executive director of the Gulf International Forum. It's a think tank based in Washington, D.C. It was only a few moments ago we were talking about the ceasefire, the putative ceasefire that appears to be organized or barely holding between the U.S. and Iran. We have to remember there is a ceasefire also for Gaza as well, and nevertheless, people on the ground in Gaza.
I thought there was supposed to be a ceasefire for Lebanon as well.
Documenting that. Amongst those people, of course, are the journalists on the ground who are trying to report and record what has been happening in Gaza. Dania, when it comes to getting information out of Gaza and highlighting the tragedies and the suffering that the Palestinians in Gaza have been facing over the 2.5 years or so of the Israeli war, how important, in your assessment, has it been to have those journalists on the ground?
Of course, it's incredibly important. I mean, I lived in D.C. During Gaza.
So Israel is just blowing up journalists.
Very challenging to get the proper
and violating the ceasefire
because of the media coverage of it. And therefore, Al Jazeera's coverage on the ground in Gaza was extremely important in shaping the narrative and understanding what are happening to the people of Gaza during that tragic, horrible war.
Paul, we were talking earlier on about the broader implications of this, because this is not something necessarily that is just limited to the Middle East. The targeting of journalists we have seen in South America, parts of Asia, we've seen it in parts of Europe as well. Do you think that this is just another indication that journalists are now regarded as no more different to anybody else, which of course they're not, but there should be certain protection. There's an understanding, there's a certain protection that surrounds media crews who are trying to cover a story, but those protections are simply being eroded.
I think that if you are in a conflict zone or a place where conflict is likely and you're wearing a flak jacket that has press on it, as we see every night on our television screens, you would expect that that would indicate to people not to shoot at you instead of making you a target. And the rest of the world depends on
You would think.
People to bring facts about what is happening. It is something that in an information age, we just assume that we're always going to have facts at our fingertips. But those facts come from people who ask questions, who point cameras in places that maybe folks don't want those cameras being pointed at, and they actually make possible our understanding of the world. If you shut them out, and especially if you murder them, for what they have done, then you are actually blinding the world to what's going on, and you're making it impossible for people to react or even to know what's going on. And the difference between what we know about Gaza, for instance, is miles ahead of what we know about other situations, such as in Africa and elsewhere, where we don't have that same kind of access. But it's politically incredibly important for us to know as much as possible, simply so that we can act. And to kill somebody for being a part of that, it's not that they're more valuable as a human being, but it is because they have a certain relevance or their job poses a threat to others. And that, I think, is something that we used to have more of an understanding about, and certainly that's eroded over the past several years.
Yes, and we have to remember, of course, that journalism itself is not a crime. Paul Musgrave, Daniel Thefa, thank you very much indeed. Let me just remind you of the breaking news we've been bringing you over the last few minutes. Our colleague from Al Jazeera, Mubasher Mohammed Wisha, has been killed after his car
I agree,
was
Jonathan.
hit
Welcome
in
to
an
the
Israeli
chat.
drone
Welcome to
attack
the stream.
in Gaza. Now, hours after a ceasefire was reached between Iran and the US, Israel has launched its most devastating attack on Lebanon since the country was invaded more than 5 weeks ago.
I thought Lebanon
More
was
than
supposed to be
100
part of this
strikes have been carried out
ceasefire
just
agreement.
hours after the United States and Iran declared a 2-week ceasefire. The Lebanese Health Ministry says at least 254 people have been killed. Have been killed, and more than 800 have been wounded. Well, the strikes came without warning, hitting locations across the country within 10 minutes. The capital, Beirut, bore the brunt of the attacks. Several neighborhoods were hit, including busy commercial locations in the city center. Israel says its war with Hezbollah is not part of the truce agreed on Tuesday.
Okay.
It's one crime after another. There are martyrs, God bless them. The state has to do something. It can't stay like this. It's a residential area. There's nothing here. Why does it need to be damaged like this?
Because the Israelis are pigs. Netanyahu's a war criminal, that's why.
Overwhelmed by the number of casualties, and the search is on for people trapped under the rubble of destroyed buildings. And beyond the capital, Israel also launched strikes in the Bekaa Valley and the southern city of Sidon, where 8 people were killed and 22 others were wounded. The city of Tyre was also attacked. Imran Reza is the UN's humanitarian coordinator in Lebanon. He says it'll be a struggle for the country to recover from this latest escalation.
The whole health infrastructure has been hit so hard by a whole series of crises in Lebanon, but also by the escalation, what happened in 2024. And over this past month of this current escalation, there have been a lot of attacks on healthcare as well. I was in a hospital a couple of weeks ago where all the doctors that I was meeting were themselves displaced. So you've had a huge amount of displacement. You have a very weak set of institutional strength to deal with these consequences. And now you have, an escalation upon another escalation. We thought this last weekend, the Easter weekend, was particularly devastating and bloody in terms of the number of casualties, the number of displacement orders that were taking place at that point. Then I think a lot of people today woke up with some sense of hope that maybe there is going to be some end in sight, even though overnight there were strikes. You mentioned the ones in Saida and also in Tyre. And then what happened this afternoon was just this, as I was saying, an escalation upon an escalation that has, I think, really
It's all Bibi knows.
shocked people at this time. And it's difficult to be shocked given the level of hostilities that everyone has been facing.
I guess the Israelis don't want peace.
Going to go
Go
back to
figure.
our reporters covering the story for us in Lebanon. Malcolm Webb is in Beirut. Obaid Achito is live for us in Tyre in southern Lebanon. So, Malcolm, let's going to start with you. Just describe the scene for us there, Malcolm.
Well, earlier in the afternoon, there was that barrage of what Israel said was around 100 targets being struck across Lebanon, including at least a dozen here in Beirut. Now we're at the site of the latest aerial attack, which is a weapon landed here just over an hour ago. I'm going to step aside so we can zoom in, take a closer look at the rescue operation that's going on here. So we're in an upmarket residential neighborhood of Beirut. It's densely populated. This building with about 9 floors.
Yeah, this ceasefire isn't going to last very long.
Has been blown off. There were no warnings. People were inside. Just in the last few minutes, a couple of injured people have been pulled out, and we can see the rescue workers there trying to find and rescue more people inside there at the top of that ladder, with the rescue worker in the cage there trying to pull, looks like trying to pull somebody from the rubble. People here completely taken by surprise, no warnings. Over the last 5 weeks or so, some of the Israeli military's strikes, mostly in southern Lebanon and in the southern suburbs of Beirut, have been preceded by forced evacuation orders. But today, it's a different story.
Yep, Fox News is reporting
many neighborhoods
that Iran is
never
closing
been
the
struck
strait
or
again
lost in
because of
recent
these
history,
strikes in Lebanon.
being hit by very powerful weapons completely out of the blue. And this is the latest one of them. The rescue workers still trying to get people out from the inside. Hospitals inundated with casualties. There have been multiple calls for blood donations from all groups. And the Lebanese Health Ministry says that 112 people have been killed today. More than 700 have been injured. And that number is expected to go up, not least because strikes, or at least here, happened just a short while ago. And they're still searching for
Even Laura
people,
Loomer is criticizing
in
the
rubble
deal,
here, and
saying that
other
Iran
sites,
practically got everything
as
that they
well.
wanted.
So it's being widely seen and
They did.
described as a major escalation just hours
Trump got
after
played
the
again.
ceasefire that was announced.
The art of the
and
deal.
hoped for, but no sign of any kind of ceasefire here in Beirut.
Malcolm, thank you very much indeed. Malcolm Webb there in Beirut. We're going to go to Obaid Achito. He's live in Tyre in southern Lebanon. We've got to remember, of course, there are two centres to this, aren't there? There is the southern Beirut that Malcolm has just been talking about, but the south of Lebanon has been bearing the brunt of Israeli attacks with wide-scale forced evacuations, hundreds of thousands of people being forced out of their houses. Just talk us through what's been happening over the last several hours.
Well, since those initial wave of strikes happened, it
I
was
hope
a
they
real
go to
shock
hell.
to the people here in the south, especially who
I
are
mean,
really
Netanyahu's
hoping for
fucking
a
this all up
ceasefire and to be able to
by
reunite
continuing to
with their
hit
families
Lebanon.
and possibly
Now
get a
Iran is
2-week
closing the
breather
strait
from
again
the intense
already.
Fighting and
We're
bombardment
not even
that's been
24
happening
hours
here,
in, and it's a
in the
mess.
south. That
And it's a mess created by
unfortunately, for
Trump
everyone here,
and
has
Netanyahu.
continued throughout the day. There were several strikes around Tyre in the coastal towns and villages where fighting was very intense up until the ceasefire was announced overnight. There is also, as we speak, the sounds of jets. They have not left the skies over southern Lebanon since the initial strikes this afternoon. The military has also evacuated a very strategic and important bridge, one of the last remaining building bridges that are operational, connecting Tyre to the
Ridiculous.
rest of the country. The military says that it's evacuating the bridge completely after it's received some threats of it being possibly targeted in the coming hours. And so this is going to make the situation even more dire for thousands of people who remain here in the city. Around 20,000 people are thought to have stayed in Tyre and refused to evacuate or forcefully flee as a result of these ongoing evacuation orders released by Israel. And the situation remains tense this evening. As soon as the sun went down here, you could see people's moods kind of go down because they don't know exactly what this is going to look like in the morning, if Israel is going to carry out more attacks, or if Lebanon is going to be included in this ceasefire that's being talked about between
I thought they
Iran
were
and the
included
United
in
States
this
and Israel.
disagreement.
Thanks for bringing us up to date there from Tyre in
Hello
southern
all.
Lebanon. Thank you very
Welcome.
much indeed. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, has said that the military had carried out a
What's
surprise
up, Leon?
attack on Wednesday, targeting hundreds of Hezbollah members across Lebanon.
The IDF carried out surprise strike on hundreds of Hezbollah terrorists at command centers across Lebanon. This is the largest concentrated blow Hezbollah has suffered since Operation Beepers.
Norode is following developments in Israel from Ramallah in
Fucking
the occupied
pigs.
West Bank. So Israel, it does seem to be determined to continue on the Lebanese front, if not in Iran. How does all of this impact Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, Rob, it's important for Benjamin Netanyahu to make a statement to his base at
Yep.
the very least.
Get done with one
that
genocide,
Israel
start another one,
decides
Leon.
When and if and how it will end the war front.
Iran should be
with
celebrating
Lebanon,
victory.
because it had no say when it came to Iran.
They got
Now,
pretty
this
much
is
everything they
important
wanted,
because
as long as
this
Israel
will at least
sits the fuck
help,
down.
Netanyahu, who is facing a lot of
Trump
pushback,
finds
who's
Bibi's
being
leash,
told all
puts him back
sorts
on
of
it.
things because of the outcome of the Iran war. It could also potentially deteriorate the situation with Iran, and that wouldn't be a very bad scenario as far as Netanyahu is concerned, because he was dead against any kind of deal with Tehran to begin with. There is a lot of anger in the Netanyahu circles that he was not included in the
Where the
consultation.
Israelis should help
that he learned
Lebanon.
at the last minute about an impending
Bibi helps Bibi,
ceasefire
just like Trump helps Trump. Welcome, Mark.
To confirm that this is not the last war. It is a step towards
Maybe.
the
It's
path
possible, Mark.
where we need to achieve all our goals. Iran now is a weak country more than any time before.
Are they?
Iran
Well, try
now
marching in there with
is
your military,
forced
see what
to
happens.
Open the Strait of Hormuz. Iran
They just closed
has
it.
abandoned all its goals, and
Have they?
including the ceasefire in Lebanon. At the time, Iran is very weak, as I said, and Israel, on the contrary, is stronger than any time.
Trump's done. He doesn't get to run again
We
in 2028.
worked, at the beginning of the war, hand in hand with our friend Donald Trump and the U.S. Army in a campaign that is the biggest in the history of the Middle East.
Who's he trying to convince, us or
No
himself?
one has witnessed this before. No one has seen such a
Right, Ricky? I saw
partnership
that.
between Israel and the U.S. against our biggest enemy.
And who broke it?
This hasn't happened
This fucking
before at
racist piece
all.
of shit right there. Right. They send our boys and girls. And Trump's happy to do it.
We're bringing you coverage of a statement that is being made by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah,
This
we're
is
full of
possibly one
phony
the
Christians
first
here.
statements that he's made since the ceasefire was announced between the United States and Iran. In the brief part that we heard,
Is
there,
Trump
we
the
heard
last president?
he's
No.
referred to this as simply a first step in the war against Iran. He said Iran had abandoned all its goals, including those in Lebanon.
Because here,
listen in again.
right, Drew. He's a goofy-looking fuck.
For
He's a
our deep
goofy-looking
friendship,
mass murderer
because the US
and war criminal.
and Israel are the ones who will change the face of the Middle East. We work together in
Netanyahu's a
order to
racist.
put an end to any threat
hates
against
the
the state
Arabs.
of Israel and against the free world. This mission is to be done through steps and through stages and through goals. We should have done
You got that right, Shadow. No, we won't.
because the line rose is there, and without this, Iran could be able to achieve their goal in having nuclear bomb and in producing more ballistic missiles to threat Israel. We have put an end to this. Iran now
You haven't
is
put an
taking
end to
back
anything.
to years and years back. And until the moment, we have stopped the process of producing missiles. This doesn't mean
Right,
that
Change?
we'll get rid finally of the threat. The threat is there.
He hates
But
Muslims,
we
yeah.
stopped
You got
the
that right.
factories who are used to produce these missiles. Iran cannot produce new missiles now. Also, we hate the nuclear program of Iran, and we have destroyed so many nuclear facilities. We have killed a lot of their scientists, those who joined the others who were killed last year.
And they
Still,
keep
there are
moving
some of
forward.
them in
They
Iran
keep killing
alive.
them. They keep replacing them.
And as said by President Trump, uranium, either to give it up, to take it all from Iran, or something else will happen. We have
And yet Trump doesn't
targeted
care about that all of a sudden.
the National Guard.
Trump's not getting the uranium.
Process of saving money.
You're not
We
going to stop their
destroyed
nuclear program.
The steel factories.
You might
We
slow it down. You're
destroyed
not stopping
the
it.
weapons factories. We destroyed infrastructure. We destroyed
They get their weapons from
Navy.
Russia and
We
China.
destroyed their ground forces. We destroyed the air forces. We have done a lot, and we have killed a lot of activists. And we have proved that we can hunt them at any place and at any time. The leaders of this regime, starting from Khamenei, the dictator, and all the leaders and siege, are
Right,
under
Daniel?
the insistence of Israel. This insistence has been seen by everyone in the Middle East. We are creating new alliances in the region. I was keen to do that because a ceasefire with Iran will not include Hezbollah. We are continuing hitting Hezbollah. And today, Hezbollah has suffered from the biggest strike against the location since the pager incident. We have hit locations.
This guy loves
Hezbollah
killing
thought
innocent people and
they are
civilians.
safe. To
Tell you
the
that much.
citizens of Israel, we promised you to restore back the security. There is a good security belt inside the Lebanese territories, in Syria as well, in Gaza as well. We control more than 50% of Gaza. Hamas.
You're watching Al Jazeera. It's 17:22 GMT. Israeli Prime Minister
Mass
Benjamin
murdering
Netanyahu
pig.
making a series of statements following the announcement of a ceasefire.
I didn't catch what
between
you
the
said,
United
Aaron.
States and Iran, which is in its first fledgling hours, and with a view to talks that are expected to take place in Islamabad in a few
Yeah.
days. It's on the
Misery
back of the
chose no
ceasefire, which was
peace.
presented by Pakistan. Prime Minister Netanyahu there.
Welcome,
making
Salsa.
various,
What's going on?
Comments with regard to what he sees as the achievements that Israel has made.
Welcome back.
With regard to the war in Iran, he said the US and Israel would also change the face of the Middle East. He said this was a mission through steps and stages and various
Trump
goals. He
is not going to
said
change the face of the Middle
Israel
East.
had helped to destroy Iran's capacity for making nuclear bombs and missiles. He said we put an end to all of that. He also talked about destroying weapons factories, the ground forces, the navy of Iran, plus infrastructure. We have proved that no one can hurt us anymore. We're going to go to Noor Odeh following developments from this in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. This is, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the first public statement that Netanyahu has made, or at least the first televised one that we have seen, and quite clearly he is determined to show that Israel's involvement in this
just
conflict
destroying.
with Iran has had the
all
results
Bibi
that
knows.
he was anticipating.
No, you're absolutely right, Rob. This is the first time we've seen the Israeli Prime Minister give a video statement after the announcement of the ceasefire. Problem that Netanyahu is facing is that what he's saying, while not new about changing the face of the Middle East, about the special relationship with the U.S. president, about even strengthening alliances in the region that nobody knows about, all of these things are in contrast to what Israelis have already heard from the military experts and from former intelligence officers, that these claims about the destruction of half of Iran's stockpiles and of Iran's ability to manufacture are not entirely accurate. They also still remember, because it wasn't months ago, it was just 40 some days ago, that Benjamin Netanyahu promised them a complete collapse of the regime, and that hasn't happened. That's exactly
and it's
what
not going to
Netanyahu's
happen.
trying to run away
This
from.
regime isn't going to
Well,
collapse.
thank you very much indeed.
Trump's not going to get regime change, neither is Bibi. You're not going to get their nukes. You're not going to get their uranium. You're not going to free the Iranian people. All this was for nothing.
Reiterating the fact that Lebanon was not part of the ceasefire deal with Iran because of the threat, as he put it, from Hezbollah.
How are you going to do that, Ricky?
That this could undermine the whole ceasefire deal. Just talk us through what President Trump has been saying about the deal and
Nothing's
about Lebanon.
changed. No.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm just, if I appear distracted, it's because I'm keeping one eye on the White House briefing just to see what Caroline Leavitt might have to say in addition to the U.S.
That
president.
stupid bitch.
But what I can tell you is that when it comes to the U.S. president, that in fact he has
Yes, they are, Chris.
been giving an interview.
China,
with
Russia,
regard to,
getting intelligence from
the
both.
involvement of Israel hitting Lebanon and what exactly that means. And what he said was because of
Yep. You got it right, Ricky. All they got to do is threaten to sink a couple of boats. Maybe hit one once in a while, just to remind people. That's all you got to do. Everybody will pay that $2 million toll.
In the eyes of the United States, as well as in the eyes of Israel, this is a completely separate skirmish. So it's clear that the United States, even though initially it appeared it had agreed to Iran's
Rinse and repeat.
10-point
This is
plan,
what
one of
America
those
does all the
plans
time.
being very clearly that there should be no Israeli
Right,
strikes
dial-up?
on Lebanon. The U.S. president already moving the bar and backtracking on that. And there's no clear sign that the United States has any intention of restraining its ally.
I don't know,
Israel.
Sasa.
In fact,
As far as I know
looks
right
like
now,
just
it's still
the
in
opposite.
place. But I
And
thought
that is going to be a problem, isn't it? Because
Israel
the
and
US on the one
Lebanon
hand
were
is trying to
included
get
in
this,
it, but
hoping to get
they'd be
this,
saying
deal
no.
ratified with Iran, but at the same time,
So
if it's not
Iran has already
rein
shut
in
down the strait
what
again.
Israel is doing within Lebanon, that is going to be a major stumbling block, one would have thought.
Yeah, there's no question it's going
Right?
to be a major stumbling block.
You got it,
because,
John. Yep,
what it
Leon, the war is
appears
going to
that,
continue.
The United States is giving latitude to Israel to basically do what it wants. And this is already starting to appear that it's unraveling what fragility exists in terms of a ceasefire or a pause. And
Ridiculous.
it seems almost as if it's a non-starter going into Friday and the talks in Islamabad where the United States is set to discuss with Iran. In fact, I've been reaching out to the Vice President's office, to the White House. There were even rumors of a background call, which now isn't taking place, about the Islamabad talks. It shows just how quickly the story is moving and potentially just how quickly this pause in fighting appears to be unraveling. So we're watching carefully to see what the White House press secretary
Ricky.
will say. She is having a press briefing as we speak. I'll get
Well,
up to speed on that in just a
it's
moment.
good for content.
But
It's not
again,
good for the
what
rest of the
we're
world,
hearing
but it's
is
good for
that,
content.
in terms of this, that the terms may be changing.
And we have about 40 seconds left, Kimberly. Just very quickly, is there a sense that you're getting there that there is that the Trump administration
it's
is determined that
Islam's
these
fault,
talks in
right?
Islamabad are going to go ahead?
Leon,
The sense I'm
the word I
getting
got
is that they are
from Fox News
non-committal.
was
In
that
fact,
because
there has
Israel
been an
kept
effort
hitting
on the part of the
Lebanon,
foreign press and domestic
that
press to really
Iran
nail
has
down,
reclosed the strait
what
as
exactly
of
is
like
going on.
half
And I
hour
hope
ago,
that
maybe.
Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, is bringing an update on that.
Kimberly, we're going to come back to you for those updates. That's our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, when we get more information from that press conference that she was talking about. Let me just give you a reminder of our breaking news that's coming out of Gaza. Our colleague from Al Jazeera Mubasher, Mohammed Wisha, has been killed after his car was hit in an Israeli drone attack. It happened in the Al Rashid Street. We'll have more in about half an hour.
Thank you all for coming to the stream today. Please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Love you all very much. Chat's popping off already. Love to see it. Thank you all. You think, Darren? Was Trump going to taco again? Trump is playing. He has no cards.
Donald Trump has
He's weak and washed up.
With Iran. He's gone from apocalyptic threats to a 2-week pause in attacks, opening the door to hopes of a more permanent peace. But from accusations of war crimes to more threats to pull out of NATO, how much has this war already cost the US, Iran, and the world? This is Inside Story.
Super chat, Sasa. I'm not monetized yet.
Hello again.
Hopefully
I'm
by
James
this weekend.
Bays. The US president has stepped back from
Well,
the brink.
thank you for thinking about donating. I appreciate it. I can apply for monetization
is in the mood for peace.
Thursday or Friday. I should have enough hours racked up. So we'll see what happens. So maybe by this weekend, I'll have super chats up. Yeah.
It was a deal brokered by
Getting there.
Pakistan with
Got enough
support from
subscribers.
China. And while it's not
Still don't have
clear
enough
if the
watch
agreement
hours
will
yet.
lead to lasting
Super
peace,
close.
what's more certain is that the US and the world stage have been changed. So how has America been shaped by Trump's war on Iran? How has the world order? And can any of it be walked back? We'll put those questions.
What cards does he have, Darwin? He just walked away with his tail between his legs and agreed to a 10-point plan put together by Iran.
Political rhetoric from the US president has swung wildly in recent days.
Thank you very much.
From threatening Iran with civilizational erasure one day to ushering in world peace and the golden age of the Middle East the next.
Jesus,
From
Darwin, it took you long enough to figure it out, you
Iran
moron.
Except unconditional surrender, to stating its 10-point
Thank you,
plan
Mark. I
is a
appreciate it.
workable
Thank you.
basis on which to negotiate an end to the war.
Mario, what's up?
On the streets of Tehran, many say they do not trust the word of the United States.
War, I mean, it's been going on forever. Of course, this war is going to continue.
We were at the negotiating table twice when
And yeah, the stock market's up today.
It will be the same.
Political observers caution
Thank you again, Mark.
it's best to focus on what Donald Trump does, not what he says.
My proudest
Any
legacy
tacos?
will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
He's a fucking warmonger
At
and a
his
war criminal.
direction, U.S. forces bombed 7 countries last year. And 6 weeks ago, the U.S.
I hear you, man.
alongside Israel launched a
Fuck
military
Trump, Kushner, and
offensive against
Wickoff.
Iran without congressional approval.
I don't like our regime.
Didn't vote for it and don't want to be in a war and don't want to be paying high gas prices for apparently no reason with no strategy.
The defense secretary was unequivocal. There was a strategy.
Iran is going to take $2 million payments for every ship as reparations, John. That was part of the agreement.
No nation-building quagmire, no democracy-building exercise, no politically correct wars.
I agree, Andy. How can you try to negotiate with Trump and Bibi?
Deliberate and systematic weakening of the U.S. military's compliance with international humanitarian law.
Gonna go on and on, Sasa.
President Trump has shrugged off questions about whether his threats to bomb Iranian power plants and bridges
How am I lying, Darwin?
signaled potential war
Come on,
crimes
bring it.
by
Bring it.
alienating allies
Sorry about that.
and keeping adversaries guessing.
Yes, they
the
did.
US president has left the world scrambling to adjust to his whiplash style of diplomacy. Mike Lappel,
Gotcha,
Al
Andy.
Jazeera for Inside Story.
It's hard to choose
Well,
which
of course, it's not clear
psychotic
whether the
regime
war's
is
over
which,
for
you
good
know?
or whether
Gets
there'll be
confusing.
More of that whiplash diplomacy to come, but it's a good moment to discuss where things stand with our guests. From London, we're joined by Sanam Vakil, the director of the Middle East and North Africa
That's brilliant,
program at
Darwin.
Chatham House. She specializes in
Darren.
Iranian and Gulf
Brilliant.
politics. Robert
That's all you got?
is in Chicago. He's professor of political science at the University of
Are you
Chicago.
a bot in India?
And author of The Escalation Trap on Substack. And in Bethesda, in Maryland, Kim Whaley. She's a professor of constitutional law at the University of Baltimore.
Thanks for stopping by, Darren. Make sure you like and subscribe, buddy.
How to Read the Constitution and Why. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. Well, I have worked in this region on and off for 40 years and covered
A seat waiting for
a
who?
number of conflicts. But
Trump?
rarely
Bibi?
in this combustible part of the world has it felt more fragile than when Donald Trump wrote this: "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." That was his threat.
He's a psychopath.
Robert. How shocked were you by those words from a US president?
More shocked than I ever have been in my lifetime in words coming out of a president of the United States.
Are you sure you're trying to
What
keep it
those
simple
words
for me, Darren?
represent
And not for
are
yourself,
the
buddy?
clearest evidence of genocidal intent that we have
USA
ever
is run
seen
by
come
Bibi,
out of
obviously.
a president of the United States. He is
Yeah, he ain't getting the
clearly
Peace Prize.
saying that he wants to end the civilization in Iran. That is what the genocide treaties and accords deal with. He is then threatening 92 million Iranians and effectively also nuclear attack. This is immoral. This is genocidal intent. And this is highly dangerous. Every American,
Yeah,
not
because Trump
just,
is immoral.
yesterday, but
He has no
every
moral
American
compass,
is now in
no
danger
ethical compass.
wherever they travel in the world as a result of this. And you can see the anger on the streets in Iran, and that's just what you see. That's what's above the waterline. There is undoubtedly
possible, Northern
deeper
Face.
anger, and it's not just coming from the government of Iran.
Kim, you are our lawyer. Let me quote you the New York Times. "It was a stunning threat delivered with all
He's got
the
something.
casual callousness that's become President Trump's preferred style of communication. Callous, or also, as Robert has suggested, they're illegal, given
He may
that
he may get a
has been
false flag
threatening
operation.
civilian infrastructure, threatening to bomb Iran back to the Stone Age."
This is a lawless presidency. The rule of law is not functioning in the United States. The Constitution, on a number of fronts, has been effectively
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
suspended. The First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment, Congress's appropriations power. The Supreme Court pushed back on tariffs, but lots of statutes enacted by the Congress have been ignored. Appointment and removal, Elon Musk, no constitutional authority for him or for DOGE, the so-called agency that he headed to slash and burn thousands of jobs and dismantle USAID that's led to hundreds of thousands of deaths in the continent of Africa. So this is just one more step, as shocking as it is, in a rapid cascade of the norms and laws being suspended. It's time for Americans and the world to wake up to the threat of Donald Trump, which has been very clearly laid out now since his first term and in Project
Over half of
2025
Americans do
leading up
not
to the
support
2020
this war.
For election, but it seems like people still are hoping that
Over
somewhere
60%
along
of
the line
Americans
there'll
are
be some
against it.
internal checks when external checks have completely failed us. But I think it's very clear there are no internal checks on this particular man, and now it's expanded
I don't
across
trust
the
any of
globe
them.
in terms of threats to international law, to security of individuals, as well as the global economy.
Sanam, what's particularly frightening, of course, is
Well,
he's
all the
one of the few
Republicans
people
are
on Earth
standing
who
behind him,
actually has
except for a
that
couple.
power to
None of the
erase
Democrats are standing behind him.
civilization, and the holder of his office is the only person who's ever done that in history. President Harry Truman ending World War II, ordering the bombing of Hiroshima.
Of course
on
they'll keep
August
it going.
6th,
That's all they know.
1945, followed by Nagasaki 3 days later.
Yes, indeed. I mean, that historical precedent certainly looms. And Donald Trump's really egregious and undignified statements yesterday, I think, scared everyone, quite frankly, in and across Iran. I think it was a sleepless night for most people, but also across the Middle East more broadly. People were very panicked about what to expect, not anticipating the so-called nuclear doom that you referred to, but that this war would take a dangerous turn and lead to
Trump got less than
escalation
50%
that
of
would
the
then
votes
lead to
in 24.
counter-escalation, and we would get mired into a trap, if you will, that would be very hard to come down from. So this ceasefire is
Yep, I
very
agree,
welcome.
Mario.
But President Trump's statements continue
Well, you're
to
in the
shock and
minority,
awe
Dwayne.
and actually
His approval
worry
rating right now is
American partners and
33%.
allies everywhere, that the U.S. Continues to be unreliable, and having executed this war without adequate planning and have, of course, relied on faulty assumptions, not really thought through the known unknowns of this war. People are very worried about what comes next, and of course, questioning whether this ceasefire will be durable.
Robert, let me put the other side to you. His supporters will tell you Trump is forthright. He speaks his mind. That is why he was elected to the job. And as Sanam just said to us, shock and awe, she mentioned, 2003 in Baghdad, the bombing of Baghdad. I was there in the Iraqi capital at the time. It was
Trump got like 49 point whatever percent. Harris got like 48 point whatever. And there was a little bit for other people that were running, independents, libertarian, whatever.
In speech, but there's extreme danger when that clarity is threatening civilization erasure. So
It might be Trump right now, Mario.
Simply a matter of, well, there's a person who speaks his mind. We know what he actually thinks.
No, Sasa.
What we are
there are
seeing
other
here
parties.
is that the
There's a
President of the
Libertarian
United
Party
States,
and
as you
a bunch
just
of other
mentioned,
smaller
is
parties,
one of a
but
handful
they don't really
of
have any
people that you can
traction.
count on one hand, who
It's mostly just
literally
Republicans,
could kill
Democrats. You
in a
can be a
matter
registered
of
independent,
hours,
but
92 million
smaller independent parties
Iranians.
don't do much damage.
That is not something North Korea can do. That is not something very many other countries can do. This is something that the President of the United States literally has the suitcase within his grasp at all times, and orders. And there's no reason, although we might think that those orders will not be obeyed. We need to understand that he has fired with Pete Hegseth, the general.
Waldo, you're wasting your breath.
In the way of implementing
Trump
those
doesn't
orders.
give a shit about
So
children.
This is really an
Unless they're
enormously
naked.
dangerous situation.
Then he likes them.
And that's why you are already hearing calls for the 25th Amendment. This is unlikely going to go away because that statement by Donald Trump, even if he took it off his Truth Social, history will not
Yes, the
forget
world is suffering because of him.
statement of true genocidal intent by the sitting president of the United States with thousands of nuclear weapons.
What's
at
up,
his
Hey Vase?
behest. Within 20 minutes, those Minutemen III, those 500,
Welcome.
could easily do that job.
Kim, I mean, we've also had the White House putting out clips of war footage mixed in with video games. And as you know, many US citizens live in very comfortable suburban lives, a very long way from armed conflict.
Well, you got that
Do you
right.
think it desensitizes
Bibi doesn't
people
care.
that they begin to forget that people in Iran are human beings who are suffering?
All politicians
and
are
who
dodgy.
dying?
I agree.
Without question, even in the United States, when there was violence and 2 murders at the hands of ICE agents in Minneapolis and Minnesota, I think the sense in the United States tends to be, well, it's not me, it's not my family, it's not my backyard, it doesn't affect me, number one. Number two would be, well, what can I do about it? I don't really have a lot of agency, and there's a lot of kicking the can down until the elections in November, somehow that the midterms, if the House goes to the Democrats, it will magically fix everything when it comes to this presidency. But the United States
Well, it
Congress
won't fix
has
everything,
been
but you can
asleep
kind
at
of put the
wheel.
brakes on them.
You know, there was no declaration of war and there was no imminent threat. And we're seeing so much misinformation and downright lies coming out of the administration, coming
You can't
out
achieve
of,
both. Northern face.
lawyers from the
You can't.
Department of Justice
It's
in
full of
open
shit.
court.
Talks out of
various
both
federal
sides of his
courts
mouth.
across the country. We're seeing federal judges issue
Because
very
he's a
strongly
stable
worded
genius.
opinions about the lawlessness of this administration, about core principles of the United States Constitution. But at the highest levels in the Congress, they're not actually utilizing the tools that are in place place to push back against this presidency, including impeachment, the 25th Amendment, even a declaration stating that
criminal
this
for
war
sure.
is outside the scope of Donald Trump's constitutional authority. And so, and then at the same time, we have the United States Supreme Court that is greenlighting a lot of, I think, pretty clear constitutional and legal violations. So the people, I think, are confused in the United States, not only complacent, but confused, fearful, they feel disempowered, and it's increasingly difficult to know where to go for accurate information when there are threats against the media, and we have some large media entities that seem to be bowing to the threats of defamation lawsuits and other kinds of retaliation from this president. So we really are beyond a red line in the United States when it comes to the rule of law, and it's really a challenge to get Americans writ large to wake up to the threat.
Sanam, you're there in London, the UK, one of the US's strongest traditional allies. The allies, most of them, were not consulted about this war before it started. What's the view of the way it has been conducted? Not militarily, but the direction, the political direction of the war, the sort of things that we've been talking about.
He's a horrible businessman, John. He bankrupted a casino.
The objectives of this war were not clear from the get-go. The goals and the goalposts shifted many times over the past few weeks. On the one hand, that sort of elasticity, could be positive because it allows President Trump an exit ramp and to form the narrative. But from the allies and partners' perspective, they have been watching the U.S. sort of sleepwalk into what wasn't a quick 4 or 5 day war, as was originally promised on February 28th, and a war that would change or alter the 47-year adversarial relationship between Iran and the United States. But it's become obviously a regional war with not limited to just strikes on Iran, but a regional war where the entire Middle East has borne the consequences of Iran's retaliation. There have been
Welcome to the UK.
consequences that have been spread beyond the Middle East. And so
what's the weather like over there, John?
Inevitably also impacted Europe, the UK, Gulf partners more broadly. And so that's very dangerous. And then optically, the inconsistency from the Trump White House in its messaging and its, egregious language again has made this war
still kind of cold here.
Unpopular. Here in the UK,
here in
but
the
I
East
think more
Coast
broadly
anyway,
across Europe, and this is
Mid-Atlantic,
what has
whatever you
driven
call it.
a reluctance from America's transatlantic partners to participate and support this war effort. There is a whole scale sort of belief that the Islamic Republic has been historically destabilizing across the Middle East. Europe has of course, taken a strong position in imposing snapback sanctions against Iran for its accelerating nuclear program. So there would have been an opportunity for allies to work together, but not in this sort of shoddy war planning without real objectives. And of course, because this war didn't take into consideration the legal norms of war, that has also raised a lot of eyebrows and questions here, and brought up rifts between Washington and Whitehall as well.
Robert, I mean, in terms of President Trump's recent statements, I read the one about destruction of a civilization. Immediately after that, there was a complete 180. I did a check of it 16 hours and 5 minutes later, after saying there was going to be the destruction of a civilization. He was messaging on his social media app, a big day for world peace.
Hello, Robert. Welcome.
Positive action. Big money will be made. Iran can start the
Northern Face.
reconstruction process. This could be the golden age of the Middle East. I mean, do you think he's presenting problems for himself there, boxing himself in and his negotiators?
He's nuts.
It's beyond boxing himself in. He's presenting the image of a truly delusional
They are fighting for
individual
idiots.
who has lost touch with reality. I have no idea. I'm not able to judge that. I'm not a professional in that regard. But everybody who will see that will know that this is not a statement on planet Earth. What we have seen, yes, a fragile ceasefire, but bigger than that, is a giant shift in the world balance of power. Iran is now the emerging fourth center of power. It is now the United States, China, Russia, and Iran that are the world centers of power. And you're seeing that in that Donald Trump is having to kowtow to Iran's demands through Pakistan to be sure that Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz in cooperation. Any ship has to cooperate with the Iranian military now. This is enormous power, and it is world power. It is not simply regional power. And then on top of that, as you're pointing out, this is in sharp contradiction to his civilization ending post just 16 hours before. So what you are seeing is somebody bouncing all around from, should I kill 92 million people today, or should we have a giant celebration? This is the very definition of that delusional actor that we fear about. And by the way, we make movies about, but this is not a movie. This is the real
Mario.
world, and this is going to have real world consequences. Our allies are not going to be down in NATO, even if Donald Trump now would say he will cooperate with NATO to defend
Welcome,
Ukraine.
Wilbert.
The idea that our allies are going to let Donald Trump control their nuclear weapons. That's what Article 5 means. The United States, in an Article 5 operation, it's the United States controls the nuclear buttons here. That is just not happening. NATO is dead. We're just now writing its obituary, but it's dead in all the practical terms.
Kim, I mean, there is an argument, and I'm going to put the other side, that Trump is a
How are you
breath
today,
of
Wilbert?
fresh air. Lawyers are too lawyerly, diplomats are too diplomatic. He speaks like a normal person, and that's why you get these sort of comments. What do you make of that argument?
That's been floating around for quite a long time, and that's one of the major
Do you, John? A lot of activity?
justifications that many MAGA voters made for Donald Trump. And I think, it's a broad spectrum. It's hard to generalize, but there's certainly a lot of strife and struggle going on in the United States just to make ends meet. Even before this Iran crisis,
Affordability is
prices are
a hoax,
skyrocketing. We don't
right?
have the kind of infrastructure that European and some European countries and other places have in terms of housing, food, healthcare, those kinds of things. And people are frustrated with government. And he came in and said, "I'm going to smash, all the
Yeah, I bet.
China in the room," and he did. And I think the sense was, okay, maybe our lives will get better. And then, of course, there's this psychological, personal identification now, almost a cult-like identification that's gone on for many years. That being said, there are a couple things that are working against him, and his poll numbers are dropping. One, of course, is the Epstein files, which has that discussion
whatever
has
happened to
now been
those, right?
shifted to Iran. So he's very good at changing the narrative. I'm not saying that's why he's done this reckless maneuver with respect to Iran. But the second is gas prices are going up in the United States pretty rapidly. And there's increasingly, even some of the talking heads that have been squarely in the MAGA movement are pushing back, including people like Tucker Carlson saying, wait a minute, this is not what we signed up for, particularly given that the increases in gas is because of this unnecessary war when he campaigned on no more wars, anti-support for Ukraine, for example. And so we're seeing a shift, but what's concerning to
Said he
me
could bring an
about
end to
it,
that war in
having
24
written,
hours.
not only about the Constitution, but about voting and electoral politics, is that the fact that the base is not supporting the president the way maybe they were is not shifting the Republican Party in the United States Congress to let go of their devout loyalty to him, which makes me wonder whether that party is really concerned that elections in Washington and the United States are going to work as a mechanism of accountability and pushback, not just for Donald Trump, but for the party. So again, we are for many reasons, we're in a very precarious moment domestically and globally, and there's not an obvious way out of the thicket in the sense that was available to Americans for many, many years, but people just weren't willing to listen, and now it's difficult again to see how we can turn this around.
For now, it looks like we're in the realm of diplomacy, although it's not entirely clear that the fighting is definitely over for good. But of course, last year in June, and when this war started on February the 28th, there had been active diplomacy underway, and Iran accuses the US of using that diplomacy as a cover to launch the war on each occasion. Where does the word of the US stand right now, and is that going to make things difficult in forthcoming talks?
No one should believe anything we say.
Make things difficult in forthcoming talks.
Well, absolutely. That's why Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire, not a 5-day ceasefire. Iran is well aware that its attritional horizontal war has also imposed military costs on Israel and the United States. Interceptors are depleting, and agreeing to a longer-term ceasefire would have allowed the other side to perhaps regroup. So this narrow window is very much focused on that particular aspect. I think the Iranians are very well aware that this is potentially a repeat of what we saw just before the February 28th war. There were negotiations in Geneva. We also saw those negotiations last year in Oman before the 12-day war. So I think that they are clearly calculating that President Trump could be just goading them in to calm markets, to reassure partners and allies. And it's important to also watch what is happening in the region.
She could be right.
There have still been strikes and counterstrikes today, but the U.S. is still moving assets into the Middle East. Troops are still there and mounting. So the escalation scenarios that were on the table prior to this ceasefire still hover over the discussions that will take place in Islamabad. So there's no guarantee we're going to get to an off-ramp.
Let me bring in Robert again. The way Trump has been conducting this, I mean, if other world leaders follow this high-stakes method of Donald Trump, where is that going to leave the world order? Do we have a situation
whose demands are unrealistic, Reaper?
And miscalculation?
Yes, we are not out of the escalation trap for 3 reasons. Number one, U.S. military forces are in the region poised to strike. Number two, the enriched uranium is still there, and Secretary Hegseth, just before we came on, said, we're going to get that uranium. And number
which demands are unrealistic?
Donald Trump has
because Trump's already agreed to them.
Diplomacy as
whatever they are.
For surprise attack. So we need to understand the escalation trap is not over. It is still there. And what we are seeing is maybe the most dangerous phase of the escalation trap to come.
Robert Pape, thank you very much. Robert Pape, Sanam Vakil and King Wei Leith. There are fast-moving developments on this story, and you can find all the detail and analysis on our website, aljazeera.com. We'd like your comments too. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or on X, tag us with your post at AJ Inside Story. That's it from me, James Bays, and the team here in Doha. Stay tuned for more Al Jazeera coverage coming up in a moment.
The conflict is arising because of Israel's insistence on striking oil facilities inside Iran.
This is one of the oil facilities.
All right, guys, stick around. We're going to be here for at least another hour, probably 2. Love y'all very much. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'll be right back.
Hezbollah rockets have reached this far into Israeli territory, and Israel consider this a serious escalation.
Lebanon's government is struggling to meet the demand for emergency shelter. This stadium is being converted into a mini tent city.
Stay with Al Jazeera for the latest developments.
On Counting the Cost,
The Iran war has sent Africa into an energy shock. Governments across the continent are scrambling to secure oil and gas supplies. Even producers like Nigeria are struggling to meet demand. So what are the options? And what does Africa need to become energy independent? Counting the cost on Al Jazeera.
Can you really bomb a political future into existence?
I don't think that's what we're trying to do. I think the objective here is to destroy the instruments of Iranian state power.
Let me ask you this directly. Is Israel effectively leading U.S. foreign policy?
They want to do a Gaza-like effort on the main power centers in Iran to kill thousands of people, not just the core.
Upfront tackles the big issues, only on Al Jazeera.
Hard-hitting interviews.
Aren't you afraid that you might be one of the targets?
Anyone could become a target. We have seen that they have no hesitation about targeting any place.
Facing realities.
Does Qatar still trust Iran enough to mediate?
Let's say that this aggression brings a benefit for no one.
Thought-provoking answers.
If Trump agrees to it, Reaper, what are you going to do?
I've heard 3 million.
Iran's not going to allow Trump to send troops onto their territory, into their country, to dig up the uranium. They're not. That's not going to happen.
When Iran retaliates, it will be a busy day for cities in the Gulf.
With the latest global news and insightful documentaries,
Right, John?
Al Jazeera's teams across the world bring you closer to the heart of the story.
It's his show to run for the next couple of years, man.
Hello, I'm
If he comes out and says we have peace and I agree to all this, what are you going to do? And he will have achieved absolutely nothing except getting American kids killed and wasting tens of billions of dollars. Didn't open up the strait, didn't get the nukes, didn't free the Iranian people, didn't get rid of the regime, nothing.
People killed across the country.
Wasted.
The US and Israel confirmed Lebanon was not part of a ceasefire.
No, of course it is, John. It's a horrible deal.
In the fighting with Iran.
Horrible, but you know, the art of the deal. Trump's a stable genius, right? Businessman, great businessman.
A targeted Israeli drone attack in Gaza kills Al Jazeera correspondent Mohammed Wishah.
And Donald Trump says the war in Iran will end when he feels it in his bones. On This Is America, we'll look at how much of the president's decision-making is based on advice
I don't know about that.
or instinct.
Musk's name might as well be Mud here. People still don't like him.
Israel has launched its most devastating attack on Lebanon since
He isn't replacing the regime. He'll tell you he replaced the regime because he killed a couple of guys, but it's still the same regime.
People have been killed and more than 800 wounded. The attacks came hours after a ceasefire was reached between Iran and the US. The two sides are expected
He probably
to meet
didn't
in
write that book.
Pakistan on Friday to negotiate a long-term deal.
Yep.
That is under
Bone
threat.
spurs.
Iran wants the fighting in Lebanon to stop too. The strikes came without warning, hitting locations across the country within 10 minutes. The capital, Beirut, bore the brunt of attacks. Several neighborhoods were hit, including busy commercial locations in the city center. Israel says its war with Hezbollah is not part of the truce agreed upon on Tuesday.
It's one crime after another. There are martyrs, God bless them. The state has to do something. It can't
believe
stay
it.
like this. It's a residential area. There's nothing here. Why does it need to be damaged
Right,
like
Reaper?
this?
His son and a bunch of younger guys that are more radical and more hardcore, more hardline than the last guys.
Overwhelmed by the number of casualties. The search
So you got
is
regime
on for
change, you
people
just didn't get the
trapped
regime
under
change you
the
wanted.
rubble of destroyed buildings. And beyond the capital, Israel also launched strikes on the Beqaa Valley and the southern city of Sidon, where 8 people were killed and 22 others wounded. The city of Tyre was also attacked. Malcolm Webb lives live for us in Beirut. So Malcolm, take us through that recovery operation that I think we can see is still ongoing behind you.
Well, yeah, this is one of around a dozen
I don't know.
sites in Beirut.
Weren't there rumors early on that he got wounded and they got him out of the country and sent him to Russia for treatment? And no one knows for sure.
But what's left of what was dozens of people's homes? Clothing, mattresses, people's possessions.
I agree with you, Mario.
Here searching through the rubble. Been working at this for hours, waiting to see if they'll find anybody who's buried beneath this. And if we look up, you can just see how this explosion rips through this building. It's an 8-floor building with about 5 apartments on each floor, and this entire half of it basically has been utterly destroyed. And then if we pull out again, with me I have a resident who lives nearby, Hadi Basha, and you said that when you heard this explosion, you came here to help your neighbors. Yeah, what happened?
I live about 50 meters away from here, and the whole building, our building, shook in an explosion. So we rushed to see where, and we noticed it was here, our neighbors and friends.
No, it
here.
isn't.
We started trying to evacuate.
Bibi just can't let go of war because he's a war criminal.
The ones who were not injured, the ones who were injured, and even some dead bodies.
He had a chance at real peace, and with less than 24 hours, Bibi fucked it all up.
So we rushed out, and it was like 5 seconds later, the whole building collapsed. Was still a lot of people in there.
And any idea roughly how many people?
Yeah,
and how
right, John?
many did you see
Yeah,
were injured?
genius, stable genius.
One of the guys who was sitting behind us, he had a 10-member family in there. So they lived on the first floor, and I guess they're kind of reached the first floor right now.
And
can you
this must have
imagine?
come as a surprise.
Definitely. I mean, there's nothing
Oh, yeah.
unusual going on here. They just
Trump's
targeted
buddies are
civilians.
definitely making money.
It's a residential building, elderly kids. I carried a 3-year-old injured kid, shrapnels in his head.
And Trump supporters will think gas prices are going to go back down to where they were before the war started, like
You know
tomorrow.
anything like this in this neighborhood before?
Good luck.
No, not since the Civil War. Everything was nice and easy here. It's a very multicultural, multinational area. It's a touristic area.
Welcome, Magic Man.
Just, your regular neighbors here.
Thank you, Hadi Basha, who just lives nearby. Thanks for talking to us. I've lost you in the earpiece, but this is the remains of one of many buildings.
We'll
hit
see,
here in
Wonder Whiz.
Beirut today in these unexpected strikes. No sign of a ceasefire here.
Yeah, I saw that about the ethanol.
All right, thanks so much. That's Malcolm Webb. There.
Gas probably will go
now,
up.
Israeli forces have killed
Especially if the
our
ceasefire
colleague
falls
from
apart
Al
just
Jazeera
about
Russia
immediately.
with a
Then we're
targeted
back to square
drone
one.
strike in western Gaza. Mohammed Mushah was a correspondent for our sister channel. The airstrike caused the car he was traveling in to burst into flames. Gaza's government media office says 262 journalists have been killed since Israel's war began in 2023. Brahim Al-Khalili joins us live from Gaza.
Yes, he is.
So, Brahim, take us through what exactly happened in this strike that killed our colleague.
Right?
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, what was meant to be a ceasefire has ended in a tragedy. This evening, Palestinian journalist Mohammed Washah, Al Jazeera Mubashir correspondent, was targeted by an Israeli drone attack, which targeted his car, causing it to burst into flames on Al Rashid coastal road west of Gaza City. This attack comes with thousands of violations committed by the Israeli military since the ceasefire took effect back on October 2025. And this targeted assassination has risen the number of Palestinian journalists killed to 262 Palestinian journalists, whether killed during Israel's war on Gaza and even during the ceasefire. The ceasefire was promised to offer safety for not only journalists but for civilians. But the Israeli
Fucking Bibi, man.
Ceasefire violations continue.
Christ.
The government media office reports that over 2,000 ceasefire violations committed by the Israeli military since the ceasefire took hold here in Gaza City back in October 2025. The
Well,
situation
Israel
remains
started
dire
again
here
when
while the
was
global
it
attention
Hamas
remains fixed on the
attacked
wider
that
Middle
music
East,
festival,
escalating tensions. Gaza
and
has
then Bibi leveled Gaza,
has not shown any
and he hasn't stopped
signs
since.
of respite. The situation remains
And then he
dire.
drug
Muhammad
us,
and
Trump's stupid
many
ass, into
journalists
Iran.
were killed just to tell the world the truth and what's happening here on the ground. And
Really, you gonna
there's
start
no
drilling, John?
International safety or safety measures provided for Palestinian journalists. They are
Correct,
being
Mario.
killed even during the ceasefire. And just remind our viewers that it's nearly 6 months since the U.S. brokered ceasefire took effect here in Gaza City, and the strikes continue to hit journalists, civilians. A separate attack took place this evening on Salah ad-Din Road. 2 Palestinians were killed and dozens were injured. Ambulances and civil defense crews cannot reach that area due to its proximity to the Israeli so-called
American
yellow
criminals.
line, which remains
Yep.
dire here for Palestinians and journalists. And let's remind our viewers that this is the second Palestinian journalist working for Al Jazeera Mubashir.
Yeah, MAGA's not
be
too bright, man.
targeted, and killed. Hussam Shabat was killed during the war, and this time was Mohammed
Trump uses the auto pen.
Al Jazeera Mubashir.
And we'll
Yes,
leave
it is
there.
sad.
Thanks so much, Ibrahim Al-Khalili. Let's continue this with Jody Ginsburg, CEO of the Committee to Protect Journalists. She joins us now live from New York. So looking at the circumstances of this, that it was a killing conducted by a drone, what does that suggest to you?
Well, it suggests, unfortunately, another targeted killing of a journalist by Israel. And unfortunately, that's a pattern that we have seen consistently since October the 7th. As your colleague mentioned, at least 260
Yeah, it's wonderful
journalists
that
and media workers have been killed
that psychopath
since
has
the start of
nukes.
the war. That makes Israel the biggest killer of journalists since CPJ started
Nah, it's not gonna hold.
documenting those deaths back in 1992. It has killed more
Trump should be
journalists
locked
than
up.
any other government, any other military force in the world. And we have seen
We're
this
all
pattern
safer because of
repeatedly
North
in
Korea?
which
Yeah,
journalists who are
much
clearly
safer.
evidently journalists wearing press vests in cars that are clearly labeled, being deliberately targeted, and that would constitute a war crime. Journalists are civilians and should never be targeted in a war.
And when you have that number of journalists in that pattern, what does it suggest to you in terms of the desire to
Well, I didn't vote him
control
in.
what the world can
A lot of
cannot
people did,
see
though.
come out of Gaza?
Well, I think it's very
I wish
evident that
Streamlabs-
Israel is seeking to control the narrative.
We
about
should be
what is
beyond this
happening
at this point.
inside Gaza.
As a
We've seen
civilization,
the
as a
the
species.
systematic targeting
Yet
of
here we are.
journalists, the systematic killing of journalists, but we've also seen attacks on media facilities. We've seen the closure of media outlets such as Al Jazeera, for example, the closure of Al Jazeera's Jerusalem bureau, and of course, censorship.
Is
of
Iran's
Israeli
regime the
media
same
outlets
as what, North Korea?
themselves. And of
No,
course,
they're all
the
nuts.
unprecedented refusal
so is
to
our
allow
current regime.
independent media access inside.
You feel safe with
Gaza
Trump's
to anyone from outside
hand on the button?
Gaza. And that,
I
of course,
don't.
is all part of a pattern in which Israel is seeking
Sometimes
to
we're worse than
control
animals.
what information we outside of Gaza receive about what's happening there.
You mentioned possible
Okay,
war crimes.
and yet you're
You
still here.
mentioned
You've been in the chat a while.
Extreme number, more than 260 journalists.
You're free to
killed.
go. No one's holding you
Has
hostage
there been
here.
any accountability, any justice in any of those cases?
Not in a single case. And this is a pattern, it's important to mention, that we saw in the decades prior to October the 7th. This is not something new. In the 2 decades
There's nothing we
prior
can
to
do about
October
it if we
the
didn't vote
7th,
for him.
At least 20
I mean,
journalists
all we
were
can do is try to
killed
get the
by
word out,
Israel, and there
change
wasn't-
people's
has
minds,
been
and make
no
sure this
accountability
type
in
of
a
psycho
single
shit
one
never
of those
happens
cases.
again.
Of course, perhaps the most prominent being the killing and murder of Shireen Abu Akleh, also an Al Jazeera journalist in Jenin in 2022. So this is a pattern that we've seen. There has been no accountability.
You got it, Trevor.
Inside Israel, and there has been almost no pressure internationally to hold Israel to account, to ensure that it upholds its commitments.
How do you change it,
to
Reaper?
protect civilians
Everybody
and
hates
to
everybody
uphold
else.
press freedom.
What options do
Everything's
journalists
extremely
left there
divided
have
here.
then, Jody?
Very few. I think we need to be frank. Very few. It is the deadliest place in the world to be a journalist. It used to be the case, as I mentioned, that wearing a press vest, having a car that was labeled press was a form of protection. Now it seems as if it makes you
It's a target.
And of course, remember that journalists are being surveilled when they use their phones to make contact with their
Sometimes, Mario.
news outlets outside.
Yeah, I don't have any
when
idea
they're
either,
trying to
Reaper.
film, they are visible. And that makes them
We're a broken
increasingly
nation
targets.
and a
What we
broken
can
people,
do is
for
to
sure.
continue to be extremely vocal about Israel's crimes and the need for accountability. We need to keep pushing for international media access to Gaza, independent external access to Gaza, and continue to call out these crimes. And of course, it's worth saying that it wasn't just, unfortunately,
They do run the
killings
world.
we saw today in Gaza. At least 2 journalists were also killed in Lebanon just today. So this is something that is
And they get better
spreading
ratings when there's
outside
division,
of
that's for
Gaza.
sure.
Journalists are being killed in Lebanon, and the
What's up,
failure
Ryan?
to punish those who are responsible for crimes against journalists encourages
Right?
further killings, further attacks on journalists.
All right, that's Jody Ginsburg, the CEO of the Committee to Protect Journalists. Let's return to the ceasefire between Iran and the US. And the two sides are expected to negotiate a long-term agreement in Pakistan starting on Friday. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says President Trump rejected an initial proposal from Iran.
The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team. With the president's deadline fast approaching and the United States military completely decimating Iran with each passing hour, the regime acknowledged reality to the negotiating team. They put forward a more reasonable and entirely different and condensed plan to the president and his team. President Trump and the team determined the new modified plan was a workable basis on which to negotiate and to align it with our own 15-point
You gave away the
proposal.
farm.
The president's red lines,
Trump gave away
namely
everything.
the end of Iranian enrichment in Iran, have not changed. And the idea that President Trump would ever accept an Iranian wish list as a deal is completely absurd.
Okay, so there is no ceasefire then.
Tough words there. Let's take them to White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett. So, Kimberly, we heard there the line, a very
Norway.
strong line coming from the White House, but also
Get your
we're
own
hearing
energy.
of signals of frustration, despite that, of frustration with how things are actually playing out on the Straits of Hormuz.
Well, what this seems to be is a cleanup operation on the part of the United States, particularly the U.S. president, who has been getting a lot of criticism for what appears to be the United States embracing what Caroline Leavitt called the 10-point Iranian wish list. And so as a result, what we're hearing is a reframing of actual events that the U.S. president, when he first put out his Truth Social post, seemed to suggest that the United States and Iran had come to some sort of agreement, and that included that there would be not only a halt in fighting, but other terms. But now the White House is saying that, no, that's not what occurred. In fact,
I hear you,
that
ball
was
striker.
a 10-point plan the United States considered, in her view, garbage, and it was thrown in the trash. And instead, the reworked proposal was merged with 15 points from the United States. And this is what will be the basis of discussions in Islamabad starting on Saturday, involving the vice president along with his Middle East envoys. So, yes, there does appear to be frustration, but there also seems to be a reframing or a rewriting of history.
What is
Of course
Donald
there
Trump
is.
saying about whether the Lebanese
Trump's a fascist and a loon. Of course he's rewriting history. Because he never read 1984. Never heard of George Orwell.
Yes, it is. The White House press secretary also addressing that in addition to the U.S. president. Of course, we know that one of the very strong points
Don't trust
made
Trump
by
to hold
Iran
any
in its
agreement.
10-point plan
Or
for
Netanyahu.
pausing fighting would include Israel halting attacks on Lebanon, which have obviously resumed. Asked about that earlier by a reporter from PBS, a news outlet here in the United States, the U.S. president said that Lebanon was not included in the deal because of Hezbollah, which needs to be taken care of, and that Israel is still striking because in the eyes of the United States and Israel, the president says this is a separate skirmish. Now, this is something that was underscored by the White House press secretary. She underscored Lebanon is not part of the ceasefire, and she said, look, this is just something that's fragile. It's going to take time to, in her words, effectuate. And
Thanks, Corey.
she is
Don't forget to like and subscribe, buddy.
as these details are worked out.
Let's
You
thank
paid someone
Kimberly
to read
Halkett
for him?
from
Probably,
outside
Trevor.
the White House. But let's head over now to Tawheed Asadi, is live for us in Tehran. So, Tawheed, first of all right, let me bring in this line that's coming in. Iran's foreign minister saying the ball is in Washington's court over whether or not, I think that's supposed to be, the ceasefire deal holds. In a post on X, Abbas Arakchi says the Iran-US ceasefire terms are clear and explicit. The US must choose ceasefire or continued war via Israel. It cannot have both. The world sees the massacres in Lebanon.
Yeah, this is all falling apart already.
And the world is watching whether it will act on its commitments.
Trump is smarter than Jesus.
Tawheed Asadi then once again. He joins us live from Tehran. So with that in mind, is it, from the Iranian perspective, is the situation in Lebanon potentially a make or break point for these?
Yeah, that's not going to happen, Streamline. What's up, Robbie?
It seems so, Sami, as we hear from different officials. A security source earlier told Al Jazeera that Iran sees it as a sort of condition among the conditions and among the list of demands that it provided to the United States, that all the battlefield fronts, including Lebanon, should witness the stopping of the aggressions by the Israelis and Americans, and that obviously something that we right now hear and see from the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi earlier.
They'll make something up for him, Trevor, just to keep him happy.
We've got the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on his X account coming out to condemn the attacks by the Israelis on the Lebanese territories. And of course, he mentioned that he obviously warned against the dangerous consequences of the attacks by the Israelis. So from the Iranian perspective, it seems like a comprehensive package in which Lebanon is obviously part and parcel of the ceasefire deal. And right now we're dealing, I would say, with a very fragile and brittle situation, as
yeah, but I agree, Reaper, but this temporary, I mean, it hasn't even been 24 hours.
Truce to be broken, and also Iranians
Hello,
are
Juanita.
From time to time warning that in case of further strikes, there is such a potentiality that Tehran considers a withdrawal from this deal.
All right, thanks so much, Tawheed Asadi there from Tehran. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the truce between the US and Iran was reached in full coordination with his government. But he says Israel's war with Hezbollah was not part of the agreement, and his forces will continue to strike the Lebanese group.
We are creating new alliances in the region. I was keen to do that because a ceasefire with Iran will not.
You're creating new alliances with who?
Continuing hitting
who the fuck is aligning themselves with you, other than Trump?
Since the pager incident, we have hit.
You're making all sorts of new friends in the Middle East.
To the citizens of Israel, we promise to restore security. There is a good security belt within Lebanese territory, in Syria and in Gaza. We control more than 50% of Gaza. Hamas cannot control this part at all. No one can ignore the achievements of Israel and its army.
Noor Raude is following developments in Israel from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. And Noor, listening to Netanyahu, you have to wonder how much of a success, a victory, or a failure is this being seen domestically for him to have to make that case?
Well, Sami, I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu right now domestically is walking on very thin ice, because that statement really contradicts his own words and promises at the beginning of the war to topple the system, to change Iran to an Israel-friendly Iran. His proclamation that Hezbollah was set back decades, and that was back in 2024. And also reporting in Israeli media that Israel wasn't part of the negotiations on this tenuous ceasefire between Iran and the U.S. They were told at the last minute their opinion was not requested, or as far as many in the Israeli decision-making circles taken into account. And that's why Netanyahu has been politically
Iran won't
bruised
keep
by
their
all
word,
of
Robbie.
this. So the
Neither will
focus
Trump.
on beating Hezbollah, on decoupling, disconnecting Lebanon from Iran is very important for him, because it also shows that he is in control, that he calls the shots, that this war front will continue, because it does mean a lot domestically. 1.4 million Israelis will not be going back to normal life, will not be resuming school, in-person schooling for their kids, as the rest of the country will tomorrow.
Right, Trevor?
Because there is still
How about that?
potential of
Prison,
clash and,
just for
and
reporting.
receiving incoming fire from Hezbollah. So Netanyahu has to have that posture, and also, but it also contradicts his line before the ceasefire, Sami, that Hezbollah and Iran were one and the same, and that he was fighting Iran on both those fronts. So a lot of gymnastics, if you will, rhetorical gymnastic for Netanyahu going on there to try and speak to his base at the very least, that
The
he
Board
was
of
still
Peace,
on top of
Dennis?
his
Yeah,
game
I know, right?
and making
That's
headway,
another joke.
changing the Middle
Give me a
East and
break.
turning Israel into a supernation, as he keeps saying.
Perhaps connected to that, Noor, we saw within hours of this ceasefire being reached an intensification, a huge intensification of Israeli strikes on Lebanon. How is that being seen? What kind of message is that being seen that Israel is trying to send?
How much have we donated?
Well, look, domestically,
I don't donate
this
to
is
anybody,
being
not even
interpreted
here.
there are two different kinds of reactions. And Netanyahu base is cheering on this escalation. And then you have the opposition. The opposition is not against escalation in Lebanon. It's telling Netanyahu to go even further. They're basically seeing him drowning politically and want to put him deeper underwater, because what everybody in Israel has been hearing from former generals, from the military establishment, is that the military cannot disarm Hamas, which is what Netanyahu is promising.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Noor Aouda there from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Abbas Aslani is a senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. He joins us now from Tehran. So in just the last few minutes, we've had this statement coming from the White House spokesperson talking about how basically Iran's 10 points are not the beginning for negotiations. We got a different picture yesterday when Donald Trump posted his announcement about a ceasefire, and he referred to those 10 points as workable. Is that likely to be seen in Iran as the U.S. changing course, or simply
Don needs the money, Trevor. He's broke. He's down to his last few billion.
Negotiations.
And Trump does have egg on his face, and now he's trying to backtrack.
Seemed to be somehow reframing what had happened, overnight. But as we proceed and as this goes on further, it seems
Where am I going, Nicola? Russia?
the course or the
I don't think so.
goalposts. And according to Iranian officials,
I don't hate my country. I hate my leadership.
They have been
There's a
violating
difference.
different terms of the agreement. In that, 10-point plan, enrichment had been, embedded and included. Also, they said that Iran
Thanks,
cannot
Mel.
enrich uranium.
Like and subscribe.
Then we have been seeing that drones entering Iranian airspace. There have been attacks. So also in Lebanon, what is taking place?
No,
which
I'm
was
not going
also
there.
clearly
Are
said
you?
by Pakistani Prime Minister. What the American officials are saying today contradicts what they were saying last night. And
on the other
this
hand,
is something
Abbas,
which is,
those
feeling further.
Those who might say, we've also had reports of Iranian strikes.
Those days are long gone,
yesterday.
Juanita.
are we seeing both sides basically undermining this ceasefire?
Well,
I'm not
Iran had
advocating
stopped
for Iran.
operations, but initially, early in the morning, there were
I'm
attacks
advocating against
Iranian,
Trump.
Oil refinery in Lavan.
There's a difference.
And
I don't give a shit
Island,
about the Iranian
and
regime.
that's why what happened.
I care
was
about their
Iranian
people.
reaction,
I care about American
later,
kids getting killed
in Lebanon,
for someone else's
Israel
war.
Also, carried out operations. What Iran did was a reaction.
You will
Iran
have no
didn't
free speech.
Initiate any kind of, let's say, attack, which could be constitute a violation.
A lot of market manipulation,
It seems
Juanita.
that, you know, the situation has been clouded and overshadowed by more uncertainty
Is what
and
Lebanon, Ryan?
confusion. Because
Let me ask you a brief question. I think we've got about a minute left. The White House is demanding an immediate opening of the Straits of Hormuz. From the Iranian understanding, have they agreed to return the Straits of Hormuz to what it was before the 28th of February?
No.
Well, Iran believes that the agreement cannot be implemented selectively. All parts of and terms of the ceasefire plan needs to be taken into account and implemented. So if they expect
Trump
Iran
is their
to
chump.
open the Strait of Hormuz
Bibi's your president.
for a free passage
Gary,
and a normal
welcome.
condition,
Welcome to the chat
they need to
and the
also
stream.
abide by the other terms of the agreement, meaning halting the cessations and attacks against Lebanon, as well as, you know, the terms related to the nuclear issue, as well as attacks against parts of Iran.
All right, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much. Abbas Aslani, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. Let's take you through some of the latest developments in the ceasefire between the US, Iran, and Israel's attacks on Lebanon. Israeli forces have killed our colleague from Al Jazeera Mubashir in a targeted drone strike in western Gaza. Mohammed Wishnah was a correspondent for our sister channel. The airstrike caused the car he was traveling in to burst into flames. Israel has launched its most devastating attack on Lebanon since the country entered this war more than 5 weeks ago. More than 100 strikes.
What's that, Mel?
Out just hours after
Make psychopathic threats to exterminate an entire civilization and then taco his way out of it because he's a little bitch.
700 wounded.
Yeah, he's a real man, isn't he?
Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it has allowed the first ships to sail through the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial part of a ceasefire deal. Pakistan is set to host further talks between the US and Iran on Friday, aimed at ending the war completely. Let's go live now to Washington, D.C. for our regular segment from the U.S. Capitol. This is America, bringing you deep into
Welcome, Daniel. Yeah, ceasefire's over. Yeah, Trevor, too many people don't understand history.
This is America, and this is the public square in front of the White House, where inside, U.S. President Donald Trump is making decisions on Iran, guided oftentimes
I hear you,
not just
John.
by expert assessments, but by his own instinct. But where has that led him, the U.S., Iran, and the world? And what do real Americans make of it? We'll hear from them a little later. But first, here's Anna Burns-Francis in our Washington studio.
Thanks, Heidi. A 2-week ceasefire has been announced. But what happens next for the man who famously boasted of the art of the deal? Can President Trump get what he wants out of the war with Iran? And who will he trust to make
You didn't answer
those
my question,
decisions?
Mel.
Our correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, is at the White House today, and Manny Rapolo joins us from the State Department. They are two of the most important wings of the administration, responsible for America's role in this war. The president reliant on the information and counsel of his advisors, not just from the State Department, but military and intelligence too.
Yeah.
Right the way along, though, Donald Trump has been keen to show he's the one calling the shots.
We could call it a tremendous success.
And then what happened in
right now as we
2008,
leave here.
Trevor?
I could call it, or we could go further.
But we took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil.
He's got the IQ of a
I
toddler.
think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion.
When are you going to know when it's over?
Okay.
When I feel
Thanks,
it.
Mel.
Okay. I feel it in my bones.
Got to feel it in his bones,
Presidential
Mel.
instinct is what
You
the
hear that,
world is
stable
now
genius?
relying on to
Got to feel it in his
navigate out of this
bones.
conflict. But talk of inner circle fractures and
His old
opposing
demented
advice from his
bones.
cabinet is starting to leak. The Secretary of Defense, one of those accused of being overly optimistic, both in public and private.
Because he's a drunk.
Epic Fury decimated Iran's military and rendered it combat
Epstein
ineffective
Fury.
for years
Epstein Fury.
to come.
So,
Decimated.
who did the president turn to for advice on how to deal with Iran, and who is he listening to now? In a moment, we'll go to Manny Rapolo,
He's the
who joins us
toddler
from the
now.
State Department. But first, let's go to Kimberly Halkett at the
I
White
can't
House.
help if a
Kimberly,
bunch of
what do
retarded
we
morons
know about
voted
how
for him.
The president is making decisions.
This country's
like
filled with
agreeing to
idiots.
the ceasefire, and where things go from here.
Well, we can look at the start of Epic Fury, the name of the
Hello,
operation
everyone.
that began more than 30 days ago, as a signal to who the
A
president
lot of the
is
media,
looking to,
yeah.
and just how small his team of advisors is. There's no question that as commander-in-chief, the U.S. president is the one making the ultimate decisions, and that this is a very
Right after he takes his
centralized
dementia
and
meds.
top-down structure. What we know is that it's personality-driven all around the U.S.
Kicking Granny,
president. So
welcome
when it comes
back.
to negotiations, they're really no different. It really
Right.
is very much
Commander
the same.
Bone Spurs.
But what we saw at the
Tough
start
guy.
of the conflict was the U.S. president
Dyes his hair and wears more makeup than a Scranton
Florida,
hooker.
not here at the
He's their
White
alpha
House,
male.
where his director of national intelligence,
Okay.
as well as the vice president, were simply taking an observer
Yeah,
status. And
a
what
lot
that
of us were
really
shocked,
signals
Trevor.
is that the U.S. president is not looking for dissenting voices, particularly when it comes to the vice president and Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence. Instead, what he is listening to is instinct over intelligence. And as a result, what you get
I'm a former
is
30-year
really
Republican.
a top-down structure.
So I don't know what
where
you're
the
talking
president
about. And a
makes
registered
decisions,
independent.
whether it
I've
is
never been a
during the
Democrat.
military conflict or in negotiations to end it.
Manny, I'll bring you in here. Kimberly, talking about those different voices. You're at the State Department. That is home, of course,
Good
to
for you,
Marco
Mel.
Rubio, a close member of Trump's cabinet.
You want a
How
golf
much
clap?
sway does he have with the president?
If you're using terms like dummycrats or democrats, you're an idiot. You're an ignorant hillbilly. And maybe you shouldn't be voting. We shouldn't be worrying about voter ID in this country. We should be worrying about voter IQ.
On what Kimberly was saying in that previous question that you asked her, it is up to President Trump at the end of the day to make the decisions.
He acts like a toddler and he speaks like one because he's got the IQ of one.
Individuals who are close to him within the administration who are more familiar with this process, who have said exactly that. And by many accounts, President Trump is leaning less on traditional
I wish they'd lock him up,
channels like
send
the
him to
State
prison.
Department, and more on his own instincts. You heard it
Best
from
president
the president
ever.
himself, who says that at times he
For
knows
stupid
when
people.
he feels it in his bones.
You're an ignorant
And part of
hillbilly.
This is President
Trump's your guy.
character. He's long expressed distrust over U.S. intelligence.
might have
agencies.
Alzheimer's, John.
He's expressed skepticism over career journalists.
That bruise on his
here.
hand ain't going
So,
away,
you know,
which
this
means
is
he's getting
important because
IVs.
Along with this sense of urgency that we're getting from U.S. diplomats here at the State Department, and when you hear it within the foreign policy
Who's using
chatter here
memes?
in
What are you talking
the
about,
city,
Mel?
this is important because this is a strategy when it comes to Iran and when it comes to negotiations that is not consensus driven, but rather, like Kimberly said, a top-down approach. So you have to imagine that there undoubtedly has to be some frustration among diplomats when they look at this strategy and see that at times policy experts are being ignored, intelligence officials
There is no
are being
strategy.
ignored, and more importantly,
Remember, Trump thinks he's a stable
professional
genius.
diplomats are not being taken into
So,
account when these decisions are being
He's
made.
running the show.
Manny
Hitler
Rapolo
thought he
joining
was
us from the
smart
State
too.
Department, and
He
Kimberly
wasn't.
Halkett at the White House. Thank you both. President Donald Trump has long maintained that he was his own best advisor, better than his generals, he said.
The only thing Trump's
His
good at
conduct
is
of the
raping
war in
little
Iran
girls.
Suggests he also believes his own counsel is wiser than that of America's intelligence agencies. John Hendren reports from Washington, D.C. on Trump's decision-making style.
Nearly 2 weeks into his war with Iran, Donald Trump explained how he would know when the conflict would end.
Keep trusting the guy that bankrupted casinos, Mel.
When I feel it. Okay. I feel it in my bones.
Since then, the president appears to have relied on gut instinct more than intelligence.
Hillbillies,
assessment in gauging the
rednecks,
threat from
uneducated
Iran and
pieces
when
of shit.
conflict would
Yeah.
end. All presidents have their circles of advisors, but
It all
Trump seems
fits if it
less
hurts your
inclined
feelings,
than
Mel.
most of his
Man up,
predecessors
find your
in
balls,
listening to their
find your
advice
inner
on the
alpha
war.
male,
Trump
and get on with your
insists
life.
Iran was, quote, very close to a nuclear bomb. overriding the assessments from his own intelligence agency.
Thanks, Alan.
that
Like and
Iran was
subscribe.
years away.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong.
Look at this stupid fucking hat. What a moron.
She's wrong.
On March 3rd, Trump's Secretary of State said the U.S. followed Israel into the war.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli
Kept
action.
changing the
We knew
narrative.
that would precipitate an attack against American forces.
That same day, Trump insisted an imminent Iranian assault was the reason the U.S. launched its initial bombing campaign.
They were going to
Yeah,
attack.
they
and we
definitely
didn't do it.
surprised him.
They were going to.
I don't know how
attack
you
first.
surprise
That's
a
how
stable
strongly
genius
they
like
felt.
this.
Trump
I
has
mean,
expressed
Jesus.
surprise
Listen to
that
him
Iran
speak.
blocked the Strait of Hormuz and
Smartest
attacked
man
US
ever.
allies in the Gulf, leaving his intelligence director dodging questions on Capitol Hill.
What about the comments the president made that thought that he was surprised?
Yeah,
at the
Trevor.
reports,
Everybody should move on from
that
us,
Iran
man.
struck
Fuck
the
our tariffs.
adjacent
Fuck
Gulf
this
states?
lunatic.
I'm not
Live
aware
your
of those
lives, man.
remarks.
Get your deals elsewhere.
King got a clearer answer.
Did you tell him? Anybody want to answer that question?
What I can tell you is that Iran had specific plans to hit U.S. interests in energy sites
Gary.
across the region.
Yep.
Now the president
He let the cat out of the
stressing
bag.
his
Trump
own
was very
instincts on
upset
when
about
the
that.
war should end. Trump says that will be his decision, but it's one that always seems to be
Sorry,
still
Antonio.
weeks away.
And I don't live in the White House
We
either,
estimated it
so.
would take approximately
No
4
pedos
to
here.
6 weeks to achieve our mission.
Keep slurring your speech.
We are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly.
The president's trust-your-own-instinct style and changing timelines continue to keep both his adversaries...
Okay, and how far do you think oil's going to fall, Mel? You think you're going to go back to paying prices at the pump you were paying 5-6 weeks ago?
To rely on one's own
You are
instincts,
not.
But at the same time, Donald Trump's been making
Oil will
calls
stay
about the
elevated.
Iran
The
conflict.
economy will stay
The Secretary of
fucked.
Defense has been busy
Affordability will stay
clearing out the
fucked.
military's top brass.
But keep worshipping the orange
purge began in the
lunatic.
weeks leading up to February 28 attack on Iran. The Vice Chief of Staff of the Army was reportedly forced into an early retirement. And 12 days later, the Chief of
I don't
Army
understand
Public
either,
Affairs
Pauline.
was also out the door. In the midst of all this, a notable exception, Joe Kent, the director of the National Counterterrorism Centre, resigned in protest, saying Iran had not posed an imminent threat. The firings continued on April 2nd, a swathe of them, in fact, including Army Chief
Who
of
cares
Staff
about Iran's
Randy
Navy?
George. The head of Army Transformation and Training was also shown the door that same day, as well as the Army Chief of Chaplains. All right, to discuss all of this and what is
Okay,
driving
James.
the decision-making
And how are
in the White
things
House,
now?
we're joined now by Charles Kupchan, former Special Assistant to President Barack Obama on the National Security Council, and from Boston, Glenn Carl, former Deputy National Intelligence Officer for Transnational Threats on the National Intelligence Council. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us today. Charles, I'll start with you. Who is President Trump
My
listening
daughter
to?
lives in California.
Trump is listening to a very small circle of people around him. Most
You
of
like the
them
gas
hired
prices?
because they passed
Okay.
the loyalty test. And as a consequence, they're going to be reluctant to challenge him, to push back, to speak up. And I do think that the United States, in this case, went to war, assuming it would be quick, assuming that the Iranian regime was going to fall pretty quickly and that the people would take to the streets, perhaps because they thought this was a weak regime, weak because of the economy, weak because of the killing of thousands of protesters, weak because of the strike last year against the military sites that was reasonably successful. It didn't pan out that way. We're now a month
They don't have a navy.
plus into the
They still have
war.
their regime.
And
Still have
listen, we
drones.
can all
Still have
breathe
missiles.
a
Still have their
limited
nukes.
sigh
Still have
of
the
relief. If
uranium.
you and I had
Still
been
have the
here
Strait of
yesterday
Hormuz.
afternoon, I would have said,
Is that
8
Trump's
p.m.
victory?
tonight,
He took out their
it's gonna
navy?
be a massive amount of violence. That's not happening, but we're still not anywhere near the end of this story.
Yeah. Glenn, I'll bring you in here because Charles mentioned the pushback or the lack of here, and I'm wondering, that's one side of it, but how much does this gut instinct come into play that we hear Donald Trump refer to, his feeling that he has about how to make a decision?
Well, he's always been fearful of and disdainful of. He's resented, frankly. That's
He is a pile of pig
better
shit.
word. The elites, intellectual, social, and so on, because they have always looked down upon him, and they have studied harder than he did and know more than he does. But they're less demanding and don't speak as loud and have elbows that
I
are
didn't say
not
they
as
have
sharp,
nukes.
generally
They're nuclear
speaking.
capabilities.
So it's a classic
Trump hasn't stopped them.
dilemma.
He slowed them
or-
down. He
or
hasn't stopped them.
structural,
They're not getting the enriched.
reality
We're
in
not going
the
in and taking
American
the enriched
policy community
uranium.
that the intelligence services
So
and
where's
the
Trump's win?
diplomatic service, the foreign service, will be at odds frequently with the political figures making policy in the White House. Our job, by design, our job in the intelligence community is theoretically to speak
He did say
truth to
smart
power,
people.
not
Smart
to
people hate
say
him.
what
He did say
one
that.
wants to hear.
He loves
but
the poorly
to say
educated.
the
Smart
uncomfortable
people hate him,
facts.
and he loves hanging out with losers because it makes him feel
Whenever
better.
a policymaker hears something he doesn't like, that has created.
But he's the
problems.
smartest
In
president
this
we've ever had,
instance,
and the best president we've
it
ever had.
is, exponentially great, more so, and he will just dismiss and ignore any advice or assessment or fact that doesn't correspond
I
with
agree,
his
Pauline.
preconceptions.
It's a difficult decision, isn't it, Charles, if you are one of those advisors, because, like Glenna said, you are there to offer that advice and you have that experience and knowledge and intelligence in front of you. But it is
And none of
ultimately
it's
the
been stopped,
president's
Mel.
right to make a unilateral decision, just as it is also his
None of it.
responsibility for that decision.
Yes, and ultimately, every president has to make tough calls. But you would hope that when they make those tough calls, they have a full range of opinion and a full range of information before them. I don't think that is the case with this president. But as Glenn just said, this is part of a movement, right? Trump was elected because he stood up to the establishment, not just Democrats, but Republicans. And many Americans felt that they were left behind by the political establishment. And as a consequence, this kind of populism, I know better, I'm not going to listen to the experts, is part of the Trump brand. In this particular instance, it's gotten him into a lot of trouble.
It does also sometimes sound like it's taking control of
Because
a
America has
situation, doesn't it?
soured
The
on
White
him,
House
and
press
now his
secretary
approval
has
rating is
already taken to the
33%.
lectern today to clarify some confusion about how America got to a ceasefire.
So let me be clear and correct the record.
This phony
Iranians
Christian
originally
whore.
put forward a 10-point plan.
What a stupid
that was
bitch.
Fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage
Blah,
by President
blah,
Trump
blah.
and his negotiating team.
Literally thrown in the garbage. Glenn, yesterday Donald Trump
Yeah,
said
like
the plan
useless
was
wars,
reasonable
Mark.
and achievable. What do these conflicting messages tell you about what is happening in the discussions happening behind closed doors?
Right, Pauline?
Well, the press secretary there was doing what she views, and this White House views as her job, which is to blow smoke and distract from facts. In any negotiation, both parties will put their ideal positions in the public domain and will present them to their negotiating adversary as a starting point. You aren't going to say, well, the last thing I will possibly accept is X as your first position. So
Thanks, Juanita.
there's nothing surprising that Iran's positions were outlandish and unrealistic. Nor is there
stop,
anything
Mark.
surprising in the dismissive way that this White House has probably literally thrown them in the trash.
I'm afraid of
But
Jesus?
this is, if you
Why would I
take
be afraid of Jesus?
The extravagance of the current circumstances away, or the spokespeople away, it's any negotiation will always have on the surface demands that are incompatible, and the real decisions occur at the 23rd hour, 59th minute of any negotiation frame, and out of sight. That's how any negotiation happens, and it's certainly been the case for the 40 years of my career doing negotiations.
Can I pick up on that point, Charles? Because, and perfect timing from Glenn,
You are
because
correct,
the
Trevor.
president has offered 4 deadlines in the space of 4 weeks. So what does
Because
the
he's
public read
stupid.
from that? That he's giving them an extra chance, or that things are really not as planned as they perhaps should have been?
Well, this is Trump in character, in the sense that whether it's Greenland or whether it's tariffs or whether it's Iran, Trump levies threats and then he pulls back. And I think part of this is bargaining. Part of this is saying, I'm going to do X if you don't do Y. And then he wants to say, well, I'm actually a deal maker, not a war maker, and my pressure tactic worked. In this particular instance, I think we're not in a good place, because the 10-point plan, and there seem to be various and sundry 10-point plans. The last one that I saw included points about Iranian control of the Strait, a complete withdrawal of American forces from the region, reparations for this war, the right to enrichment of nuclear material. Those are all showstoppers, right? And the things that Trump wants, no enrichment, caps on ballistic missiles, no support for proxies in the region. These are things that the Iranians aren't even talking about. So the bottom line here is it looks like a ceasefire is haltingly taking effect. But when you say, are the two parties anywhere close to finding common ground to end this war, the answer is no.
Even before we got to this point, we have seen formerly very close confidants of the president, such as Tucker Carlson, try to sway him away from
Trump
escalating
tacos his way
conflict.
through life. Some things never change.
Did you try and persuade him that this would be a terrible idea?
Of course, that's why I went 3 times in a month, 5 weeks maybe. That was the first thing I said to the president and anyone else who would listen. Once this starts, the world is going to find out exactly how strong we are, which is not something you necessarily want to reveal. An implied threat is much more effective.
Charles, is that a pretty fruitless task to try
When you've
and
lost
accomplish
Tucker
to pull
Carlson, man,
President Trump? He obviously
you've
answers
lost the
phone,
plot.
but
Tucker Carlson,
listen.
Alex Jones, Joe Rogan,
You know,
they're
I
all
think
off the case.
Tucker Carlson represents
Just remember that.
a food fight that's taking place inside the MAGA movement. Because on the one hand, you have
Good.
people like
Let them
Carlson,
fight.
J.D. Vance, I would put in this same category, who really backed this idea that the United States was done with these big, expensive, forever wars in the Middle East.
Could have been Trevor. Could have been a setup.
Donald Trump comes to office saying, I hear you, we're done.
Yep.
We're going to
I
focus
agree,
on
Ryan.
problems here at home.
Hello, Post.
And then he launches
Welcome.
a massive war that causes huge disruption to the global economy, that costs billions of dollars. And his base is kind of saying,
I agree,
what is
Miguel.
going on here? You told us you were going to do the opposite. And I think what we see in Trump is a tug of war in his gut, right? On the one hand, he
His gut's
understands
big
that
enough.
the United States has been doing things that
Fat
haven't worked
fuck.
out very well. On the other hand, he's thinking about his legacy. And I think that he wanted to go down in history as the
He's building a
American
triumphal
president
arch for
who
himself.
finally did what no one else had the guts to do, topple the Islamic Republic. The problem is that the reason that his predecessors didn't try to topple the Islamic Republic is because when they looked at the facts and they did their homework, they said, we would probably get a result that looks like the one we just got. And as a
Exactly.
consequence, I think they said, we better be careful. Trump wasn't careful. He jumped into the deep end of the pool.
And now he's
Charles just
drowning.
mentioned there a tug of
Someone
war
throw him an anchor.
For the advisors now, and that is across all military and intelligence, but particularly those close cabinet members sitting around the table with
Yes, they
President
did,
Trump.
Ryan.
What is their approach now? If he doesn't want to hear their no, what do they do?
What's on the political agenda?
Well, you're probably in the
Just
hardest
watching the war
position,
continue.
conceivable if you are in a position where you're supposed to advise Donald Trump. It's a terrible dilemma that anyone has, whether it's a political appointee, such as Rubio, say, or the Secretary of Defense, or a professional civil servant like a CIA officer or a State Department officer, because he doesn't want to hear what disagrees with his inclinations. And you'll have your head cut off if you in any way challenge him, which really should be your job. So everyone has tried. We've all seen it. Well, I will make nice to the big man. I'll flatter him and say, yes, you actually are a nuclear expert because your uncle, whom you never met, was a professor at MIT. That makes a lot of sense, but okay. That's the only way forward other than
Trump's a
to
genius
go
by proxy.
into opposition, and you'll be removed from office. For the professional people, it's a hideous dilemma because our job is to try to present facts and to double check them because it's impossible always to be right. And the civil service, the professionals have been sidelined, if not removed entirely. So there's really no happy way forward with someone who, quote, thinks from his gut, which means he just acts on his impulses and preconceptions.
Glenn, I want to come back to you in just a moment, but Charles, quickly before the end of this interview, when we talk about saying no and who might have some pushback, J.D. Vance
Trump
was said
in
to be
trouble?
one of the sole dissenting
No,
voices.
Trump doesn't
He
suffer
is now
consequences.
being put in charge of the negotiations. What chance does he have?
People under him like Hexeth are,
J.D.
though.
Vance is someone who tried to talk Trump out of the war. J.D. Vance is someone who was in that MAGA camp, which is no more forever wars. And as a consequence, he
I hear
may
you,
be
Curtis.
willing to show some flexibility, to make some concessions with the Iranians that other members of the administration would not. But I think the bigger picture right now is Trump's political fortunes. And right now, Trump is facing a political base that is unhappy about the war and unhappy about the price of gasoline.
All right.
And that's why I think he wants to get the strait open.
Just quickly then, Glenn, for some final thoughts from you, does this put the US in a worse position when it comes to fighting other wars in the future?
Well, we invaded Iraq theoretically to bring democracy to the Middle East and to eliminate a threat. One of the major consequences of our invasion of Iraq was to extend Iran's influence, at least to the Tigris-Euphrates River and throughout Iraq itself. And here we invaded or attacked Iran, probably to overthrow the regime, as Charles said. And the consequence is that now we have a regime that
I agree, Trevor.
probably is
We need to get
more
younger, too, politically
firmly
speaking.
seated in power than it was 6 weeks ago.
Both parties. Too many, too old people. Way too old.
And it has more control
Not just Trump,
over
on both
the,
sides.
Straits of Hormuz,
Get rid of the
and
old
economy
guard.
than it did 6 weeks ago. So that is a dilemma. Now, on the negotiations, just quickly, I think all of us are focusing too much on the 10-point plan, the 15-point plan, the American, the Iranians. Fundamentally, this is a ceasefire because Trump was in an impasse. He didn't want to invade because he realized the consequences would be eternal and very troubling. He didn't want to walk away because
Israel is already ignoring the ceasefire.
Stronger. So he's declared a ceasefire, and Iran won't get any of its demands really. So we'll go to the status quo ante, which will be passage of the Straits of Hormuz for traffic and a regime in place, watched over by hostile Israel and the United States.
All right, that's all the time we have. Glenn Carl, thank you so much for joining us. Charles Kupchan in studio, thank you as well. We'll debate online as to whether Trump is making decisions on his own or is following the advice of others. Alex Baird has been keeping tabs on the conversation.
So how is the president making these decisions? In the lead up to the war, the White House would have said the greatest
Well, first he takes his dementia
cabinet
meds,
of all time.
and then he
But
just
according
wings
to
it.
Trump's former communications director,
the decision-making is being made by a council of one.
Anthony Scaramucci, saying good presidents may not know the right answer, but they're good at asking the right questions. Hard if you're a council of one. Trump confidant and celebrity doctor Dr. Oz saying the president is on the ball and he is making the right decisions.
Free elderberries for
All
everyone.
the time with very
This fucking
precise,
moron.
well-targeted questions. He's an excellent executive, a superb leader.
Prominent American journalist Chuck Todd labeling those surrounding Trump as yes men and yes women. The president existing in an echo chamber. Far-right news source InfoWars saying the president's being misled because anyone who would have said no is now gone.
They've all been driven out. They've all been driven away. Now nobody's telling him his decisions are bad.
Trump is widely reported to be a big listener of
InfoWars.
conservative podcasts
You've
and
lost
Mark
Alex
Levin.
Jones and
He
InfoWars.
is swinging out at any critic saying Trump could lose the midterms because of him. Former MAGA voice Megyn Kelly calling for an accountability witch hunt of those she says pushed Trump into the Iran war.
We need
I'll
to
start
know
with
exactly
Bibi.
who talked him into it and what representations were made to convince the president that this was a good idea. Who?
Regardless of who led Trump here, Democrat activist and author Amy Siskin says the president is now getting back to...
You're fired. You're fired.
His roots.
You're fired.
Now an evolving door of voices in the president's ear.
Let's go back to Jaime Joe Castro, who's been gauging what the public thinks of Trump's decision-making.
I'm in Lafayette Square, where people from all over the country come to get that picture in front of the White House. They come from red states, from blue states. Some are Trump fans, some are not. And so I put this question to them. Do you trust Trump's instinct on Iran?
No, I do not.
Why is that?
Because I feel like he's a petulant child. Like every day it's giving me whiplash. He's like bipolar in his decision making. So unless I can trust somebody to be consistent, which he is inconsistent always, I don't trust their opinion.
I'm not so sure. I think there should be a little bit more reasoning behind it. He should be kind of considering what his cabinet has to say and what Congress has, kind of what Congress thinks about it as well.
Do you trust Trump handling Iran using his instinct, as he often says he does?
Yes, so far it's working.
What do you like about it?
That it's working.
What's working?
What makes you believe in his gut about this?
Because what he's said he's doing, and it's working.
Making
There's
tacos?
no undesirable outcomes so far, meaning
You've got a couple dozen American kids dead, hundreds more wounded.
Decimation of the population didn't happen.
His other actions have shown that sometimes he leaps before he really honestly thinks through everything that's going to be going on.
So we heard
That's
a
what
mixture
stupid
there
people
of
do.
skepticism, anger, support, and faith in Trump. But what's important here is there's only one opinion that matters, and that is the one that belongs to the commander-in-chief. The American people have no voice on this until the midterm elections in November. Until then, this is Trump's war to direct, and the rest of America is just along for the ride.
Well, that's all from the team here in Washington, D.C. We'll hand back to Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.
All right, guys, we're going to do one more hour. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for liking and subscribing. And I'll be back in a minute.
The latest news as it breaks.
According to reports, Donald Trump is keen to end this war in order to try to regain some of the popularity which he has lost because of this war.
With live coverage.
Trump's frustration with NATO now seems as hot as ever, goading them into action in the Strait of Hormuz, particularly France and the United Kingdom.
From the heart of the story.
Many Republicans are saying that a ground operation is the only way to finish this war.
The world's top business stories.
How high could prices go for oil? Also, how quickly can this feed into the inflation picture?
Counting the cost on Al Jazeera.
I'm Rob Atherson, and you're watching Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the ceasefire and the war between the US, Israel, and Iran. Coming up. Iran accuses the US of violating Tuesday's ceasefire agreement after a wave of Israeli attacks on Lebanon killed more than 250 people.
How's that Biden derangement syndrome working out for you, Mark? Sleepy Joe is long gone. Nobody cares about that anymore.
The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage.
A battle of narratives in the US and Iran. Washington dismisses Tehran's 10-point proposal less than 24 hours after Donald Trump
What's
said
up,
it
Post
is a
DMZ?
workable basis on which to
Welcome.
negotiate. And a targeted Israeli drone attack in Gaza kills Al Jazeera correspondent Mohammed Wishad. Israel has launched its most devastating attack on Lebanon since the conflict began more than 5 weeks ago. Officials say at least 254 people have been killed, more than 800 have been wounded. The attacks came hours after a ceasefire was reached between Iran and the US. The two sides are expected to meet in Pakistan this weekend to negotiate a long-term deal, but that is under threat. Iran wants the attacks on Lebanon to stop too. Israeli strikes on Wednesday came without warning, hitting more than 100 locations across the country within 10 minutes.
Maybe he's got to go.
Bore the brunt of the attacks. Several neighborhoods
He is
were
a
hit,
war
including
criminal.
busy commercial locations in the city center. And rescue teams
I
in
agree.
Beirut have been rushing
Right?
to the injured to hospitals.
Trump doesn't
that
care
are
how many
already
kids he
overwhelmed
kills
by the
to
number
get
of
what he wants.
casualties. And search operations are ongoing for people feared trapped under the rubble of destroyed buildings.
I should play a techno song?
I'd expect anything except this. For this to happen in Beirut, no one has any idea why. It's a shock. I mean, for 50 jets to bomb all of Lebanon in just seconds. This is a residential area. There are businesses, homes, everything.
It's caused shock and fear, especially for the children. We never expected that out of nowhere, with no warning, they would strike us like this.
I have no idea why they would bomb this area. It's a residential area. It's not an area tied to the Shia sect. It's mostly Sunnis here. We have nothing to do with any of this.
Well, this was the scene after attacks in the southern city of Sidon. At least 8 people were killed. Both the US and Israel say halting attacks on Hezbollah is not part of the truce agreed with Iran on Tuesday. Israeli leaders have vowed to continue striking the Lebanese group. And the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, says 3 clauses of the ceasefire have already been
fuck
violated.
Israel, Pauline, I agree. Yep, Leon, definitely evil.
Non-compliance with the first clause of the 10-point proposal regarding the ceasefire in Lebanon, a commitment the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has also
Bibi's horrible for the Israeli people. Absolutely horrible.
Ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and other regions, effective.
Nobody likes the American government right now.
Second, the entry of an intruding drone into Iran airspace, which was destroyed in the city of Lar in Fars province, in clear violation of the clause prohibiting any further violation of Iran's airspace. And third, the denial of Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in 6th clause of the framework. We're live in Beirut, Tyre in southern Lebanon, near Ramallah and in Tehran. First, we're going to head to the Lebanese capital. We're going to speak to Malcolm Webb. Malcolm, talk to us about the scene that we can see behind you there. We can see the level of devastation that there has been.
This is one of the sites that was hit completely unexpectedly.
It's too late for Bernie now, man. He's way too old.
Hours ago, let's come in and take a closer look at what about a dozen homes look like when they're instantly collapsed. You see these enormous chunks of blasted concrete and some possessions. A pair of jeans here, some women's shoes, some school books as well. Here's somebody's mattress.
We need to get younger, Pauline.
And many of the residents were...
I like Bernie, I like some of his ideas, but way too old.
When it collapsed.
Larry David.
Say that it was about 20 or 25 minutes after the
we could do worse.
Missile or the rocket hit that the building fell down, and there were still many people inside. So since then, this excavator's been digging through the rubble looking for any survivors. Just a few minutes ago, the body of a woman was retrieved, taken away in an ambulance. Some of the people waiting around here are survivors.
War crimes. Nothing but war crimes. Why are we bombing civilian infrastructure? Why is Israel bombing civilian infrastructure? With my tax dollars.
And Malcolm, talk to us about how the hospitals are coping, because we've been discussing the number of casualties, about 254 people killed, over 800 people injured, and the hospitals, as we understand, are already struggling.
Yeah, they're overwhelmed. There have been repeated call-outs for blood donations of all groups. These strikes on buildings like this, of course, have caused dozens of deaths, hundreds of deaths, as you said, hundreds of casualties as well, which the health service, already stretched, has been completely overwhelmed with the sound of Beirut this afternoon, and this evening has just been the constant wailing of sirens.
No, they are not the U.S. ally.
Like this, and ambulances rushing to collect the injured, or in many cases carrying the dead to the morgues.
Malcolm, thank you very much indeed. Malcolm Webb there in Beirut for us.
We're surrounded by idiots.
Is live in
We knew
Tyre
this was
in
going to come.
Lebanon. The south of Lebanon, of course, has borne the brunt of the Israeli attacks, and there have been wide-scale forced evacuations, from forcing people from their homes. What's been happening in the last
Thanks, Tunes Boss. Like and subscribe.
Absolutely. Following the airstrikes earlier today, the civil defense here in Lebanon has confirmed that at least 17 people were killed in Tyre alone in those strikes. Another 68 or more people were injured in those strikes.
They are
The
using
local
us.
hospitals were asking for people to come and donate blood because
We tried to
of
warn
the
them.
large number of
They
injured
didn't
people
listen,
who are
Paulie.
receiving treatment. The situation remains quite tense, actually. Just a couple hours ago, or less than a couple hours ago, the Lebanese military announced that it was evacuating the Qasimiya Sea Road bridge because of a threat of it being targeted. Thereafter, it was actually targeted. Now we're getting confirmation that that bridge has been damaged. It's not clear how much of it is still operational or if people can actually use it to cross over the Litani Bridge, the Litani River as they leave the city of Tyre. But the situation remains tense, and this is not what people were expecting. People keep talking about this surprise attack, and that's the best way that we can describe this at this point. Early on in the day, people were expecting a single strike on a single building that was marked and announced by the Israeli forces. But what happened after that was a series of strikes here in Tyre and around Tyre and throughout the country. Over 100 strikes in a span of only 10 minutes, causing mass destruction and mass casualty events throughout the country. And people here are really concerned now that this is going to intensify. As we speak to you, there are still drones flying low here in the south of the country. We're also getting reports of some explosions in other parts of the country following the events of this afternoon. So for now,
Full Metal Jacket, great movie. Haven't seen it in years.
And for the 100 or 100,000 people or so that are still here south of the Litani River, that's extremely concerning, considering their options in terms of leaving this area and going north are extremely
Yeah, I'm
limited.
angry too, Leon.
Reporting there from Tyre,
This is
southern
not
Lebanon.
cool.
That's Obaid Akita. Thank you. Well, Prime
They
Minister
just
Benjamin
keep going and
Netanyahu
going.
says
Bibi keeps
Israel
going and
has,
going and going.
has made
When's
its
he going to
first
stop?
public address since the start of the ceasefire with Iran. He says Israel
Maybe we
remains
should
ready
stop
to
giving our
confront Iran
tax
again
dollars to
if
Israel.
necessary,
Maybe we should
despite
stop
the tensions
giving them
between the US
the
and
military aid that we give them.
We still have objectives to complete, and we will achieve them, either through agreement or through renewed fighting, because we are ready to return to battle at any moment required. Our finger is
I
on
agree,
the trigger.
Feature.
Nor is following
They are
developments
terrorists.
in Israel from near Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. So Benjamin Netanyahu making this first public address, as we were just mentioning, Israel at the same time ramping up its attacks.
It's
on what it
definitely
calls Hezbollah
billions,
sites
but he
in
doesn't take a
Lebanon.
paycheck
How
because
is
he's a
all
great
this
American and he
playing out
cares,
politically
right?
for Benjamin Netanyahu?
Sorry,
Well,
Frank.
Benjamin Netanyahu is really in hot.
You know, you can find this news anywhere online, right?
The Israeli opposition.
People come here
have
for the
taken
atmosphere.
To social media, to the airwaves, to accuse
They
him
can get a burger
of
anywhere.
creating a strategic diplomatic disaster for Israel. He promised the moon. He promised a collapse of the regime, a change of Iran, an Israel-friendly Iran, and so on. He even said that Hezbollah had already been defeated before launching the war, and all of those things didn't really pan out. And it's not just the politicians. We're hearing from all sorts of people in Israeli media, also with a lot of criticism for the Israeli Prime Minister. Let's take a listen to some of what they had to say.
40 days of war. What have we gained? Deaths on the home front, fallen soldiers, and thousands of residents who have lost their homes, while none of the war's objectives have been achieved. The nuclear program has not been eliminated. The threat of ballistic missiles to Israel still exists, and the regime remains in place.
Trump got nothing. He got played
Houthis, and Hamas.
because he's a taco.
This is a failure by Netanyahu. The one running Israel's foreign and security policy is Trump, in Gaza and in Iran, and I hope it is not the same in Lebanon. This is the reality. Netanyahu has turned us into a subordinate to the US.
Israel didn't end this war. It's a secondary
Okay.
player in
Well,
it.
download
It's
an app.
essentially
You
been
can
riding on the tiger's back, and it's clear that the tiger's
watch it
interests and
anywhere
the
on your
riders are
phone,
the same.
you know?
Right now, from a geopolitical standpoint, unfortunately, we haven't come out.
You just want a
stronger.
burger, go to Flingers. Here at Tchotchkes, people come for the atmosphere, so Stick around, Frank.
And even though the intelligence estimates and even the
I'm not
Israeli
wearing my
military
flare,
is
though.
saying that bombing Lebanon
Gonna get some
like
flare.
this in an unprecedented manner wouldn't disarm Hezbollah, it seems that the opposition is pushing Netanyahu to escalate even further just to prove them wrong, knowing full well that
It is my
all
channel
will have a
feature. Yeah,
cost
thanks.
come October when Israelis go to the ballot boxes, Rob, because that is really what the opposition is eyeing, defeating Netanyahu and making sure he doesn't have another election victory.
Bringing us up to speed there from Ramallah and the occupied West Bank, that's Noor Ode. Noor, thank you very much indeed. Iran's foreign minister says the ball is in Washington's court over whether or not the ceasefire deal holds. In a post on X, Abbas Araghchi says the Iran-US ceasefire terms are clear and explicit. The US must choose ceasefire or continued war.
I'd love to
via
watch Trump
Israel.
try to play
Cannot
basketball.
Have both. The world sees the massacres in Lebanon. The ball is in the US
Yes, they
court,
do, Rolf.
and the world is watching whether
It's all
it will
Bibi
act
knows is
on
war.
its commitments. We're going to bring in Tokat Asadi, joining us now live from Tehran. Iran already warning of ceasefire violations just in the first few hours of this ceasefire, and using some very strong
No,
language,
Ryan, I'm not
particularly
with Trump.
from the Revolutionary Guard, about how it might respond.
I've never been with Trump.
Yes, indeed. We hear this
Going all the way back to the
message from
1980s.
the Iranian side, warning about the repercussion of the breach of the ceasefire agreement. And obviously, Lebanon and the situation there seems to be critically important, as you mentioned, from the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and also from the Speaker of the Parliament. And added to that, now we hear from the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian during his phone call with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron. He came out to say that the ceasefire in Lebanon is one of the pivotal conditions when it comes to the 10-point Iranian proposal directed to the United States. And obviously, this is not the only factor.
November's going to be huge. Absolutely huge.
Escalation and a potentiality of maybe Iran's withdrawal from the ceasefire agreement, but also we know.
Why am I a never Trumper since the 1980s? Because he's always been a grifter and a slime ball. Always.
Also, they are talking about the downing.
Some things never change. He's just older and more demented now. He was a grifter back in the 80s when he was building those shitty casinos in Jersey. I never liked him. Never.
And fragile situation as Iran and the United States are heading towards a meeting on Friday scheduled in Istanbul, in Islamabad, my apologies, to pave the way for a diplomatic settlement to settle down the issues. But still, we know that even when it comes to that,
That's all he is,
meeting,
Pauline.
Iran says it's
Used
going
car
to take
salesman.
part. Iranian president as well as the National Security Council of the country confirmed that, but the context is surrounded by this cloud of mistrust when it comes to Iranian perspective towards any rapprochement with the United States. And obviously, that's coming from the very fact that they've already tried the trajectory of negotiation and diplomatic engagement, not once but twice over the past 10 months. I think all sides are pretty much aware of how high the stakes are, but it's still Iranian side is talking about a
good luck with that feature. Getting all that special interest money out of politics.
Scenario down the road. This is what we hear from the IRGC, the military sources here. That
are you going to watch the cage fighting on the White House lawn, Pauline, sorry.
That there's going to be a sustained
during the 250th celebration.
Even though the country is trying the trajectory of diplomatic engagement.
Tokat Asadi there talking to us from Tehran. Thank you very much indeed.
Right now, Ryan, I'm center left.
Mentioning on Saturday, both the US and Iran are expected to begin negotiating.
I used to be a hardcore Republican.
In Pakistan's capital,
almost 30 years.
It's expected to happen in
until a bunch of uneducated rubes made that moron the face of the party. And I said bye-bye.
Caroline Levitt has now said that President Trump has rejected Iran's 10-point proposal.
The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump. and his negotiating team.
Why is she
With the
always so
president's deadline
shrill?
fast approaching and the United States military completely decimating Iran with each passing hour, the regime acknowledged reality
I don't like
to the
it,
negotiating
Bub.
team. They put
Bob.
forward a more reasonable and entirely different and condensed plan to the president and his team.
What do you think if Trump's
President Trump and the team determined the
hillbilly
new
brown
modified
shirts
plan
executing
was a
American
workable
citizens
basis on which to negotiate
on
and to
American streets
align it with
in broad
our
daylight?
own 15-point proposal? The president's red lines, namely the end of Iranian enrichment in Iran, have not changed. And the idea that
you're not going to
President
get
Trump
that.
would ever accept an Iranian wish list as a deal is completely absurd.
But on Tuesday, this is what Trump said on Truth Social. I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. We receive a 10-point proposal from Iran, and we believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized.
No,
and
Ryan, I don't.
consummated. We're going to take a closer look at Iran's 10-point proposal to end the war, and it includes a commitment
But I think
from
it's
the
funny
US that there will be
that they're
no
handing Trump
further
his
attacks,
ass.
continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of enrichment, likely referring to its nuclear development program.
I'm here
Iran
for
is
all the
also
Trump
demanding the
failures.
lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions,
And I don't want
an
to
end
see American
all
kids
UN
get
Security
killed
Council
because
resolutions
Trump's an
against
idiot
it,
and a
an end to
warmonger with
resolutions by
Bibi.
the International Atomic Energy Agency, the
I want
UN
Trump to pack
nuclear
up his
watchdog.
toys and go home.
Iran wants to be compensated for the
We were
damage
promised no
caused
new
by the
wars
war,
if he was
and for
elected
US
president.
forces to withdraw
And here
from
we are.
countries in the Gulf region. Tehran says the end of hostilities must extend across all fronts, including the fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Finally, it's calling for international guarantees to enforce and uphold the
I don't know,
agreement.
Ralph. There was a 10-point agreement
Guest.
yesterday, and now all of a sudden,
Danya Thafar, the executive director of the Gulf International
now there's
Forum.
not an agreement.
It's a think tank. It's based in Washington, D.C. Paul
I don't know.
Musgrave, an
I don't know
associate
what's going on.
professor at Georgetown University in Qatar and a U.S. foreign policy analyst. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Sena Azodi. He's the director of the Middle East Studies program at George Washington
Really, Bob?
University. Thank you, all three of you, for being with us on Al Jazeera. Paul, I want to start with you. The fundamentals of this are which of the 10-point plans do we believe they're actually going to be negotiating about? Iran, we gave the list of their demands there. Caroline Levitt, the spokesman
Guaranteed,
for
Viking.
the White House, saying, no, we actually ditched that one. We're not talking about that. So if that has been thrown out of the window, what are
Right,
we going
Joe?
to discuss?
Welcome everyone to the chat.
Fundamentals beyond
To the
any
stream.
pair of negotiating positions have to include the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear program, the future of the United States in the Gulf, and of course, some sort of reconstruction program, not necessarily the United States being involved, but some sort of way forward for Iran. These are just issues that you can list. The Iranians, I think that Press Secretary Levitt was right to describe the original proposal as a wish list. It very much is. They're not going to get this. But the Americans also face the
we'll see
problem
about
that
that.
they have a lot less leverage than they had 6 weeks ago. The United States has shown that it is somewhat less resolved than it was portraying itself back in February. It's clearly not able to open the Strait of Hormuz by military force. And these are just things that you can't get around. So everybody knows what the fundamentals are. The question is simply, what is each side willing to accept? And we've certainly heard from other sources that the Americans latched on to any sort of proposal that they could use to get out of President Trump's
God is laughing at
self-imposed
Trump.
deadline, which suggests that the Americans were
embarrassed
eager
by
for
him.
some way in the fighting. But of course, Iran has also suffered tremendously during this war, and certainly I suspect that Tehran would like a way to move forward. But when we look at something, especially the Strait of Hormuz, it's really hard to see how you can divide that particular issue in a way that both sides would find acceptable.
To the Gulf nations, that's where so much of their trade goes through. We have ships that are docked all over the Gulf, primarily because the strait is currently closed. To what extent do you think that the Gulf nations are going to be able to influence the talks that are going to be happening in Islamabad and put their points forward and make their voices heard?
This seems to be a question here in the Gulf. There's great concern about the Strait of Hormuz, and it would be a complete strategic failure for the Gulf states to have Iran be the policeman of the strait. Especially
That's what you're getting.
For some of the smaller Gulf states that are
Along with
locked in the
Oman.
Strait of Hormuz, like Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait. Also, just to add that 1/5 of the world's hydrocarbons go through the strait. Fertilizers, so that means fertilizers, so many other commodities that
Everything's
are
going to
important,
cost more.
for the world economies, aside from just
Sorry, Viking.
hydrocarbons.
We all tried to warn you, man.
And this would allow Iran to have a huge amount of
At least you figured it out.
leverage over the
Better
Gulf
late than never.
states and be threat, a constant threat to them. And actually, I truly believe Iran having control of the Strait of Hormuz is more dangerous than drones and missiles coming into the Gulf states. So it's a complete strategic loss for the Gulf states and I think the international community as well.
Sorry, I want to pick up on that point that Daniel was making.
Yes, he has.
Control that
Yes, he has.
Over the strait. In your estimation, how much?
I mean,
what is the leverage now that Iran would?
You
have
voted
going
for
into
what?
negotiations
Lower
like
prices
this,
on day
compared to
one
the kind of leverage
and no
that it
more
might have
wars,
had in
right,
the past
Viking?
when it was going through the nuclear negotiations.
How's that working out for MAGA right now?
I think that having control over the Strait of Hormuz is a far better leverage for Iranians than compared to what they had prior to the attacks, the recent war, because back then Iranians entered the negotiations with far less playing cards, if you will. Their the best card that they had to play was the 60%, the 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that they had. But now they realized that by putting a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, they can make the West and global markets scream. They've seen how markets have reacted to the closure of the Hormuz. They've seen how the markets and oil prices reacted to the news of the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. So I think
what do you think happens with the Republican Party, Viking,
leverage
for 28?
Entering the negotiations. And
do you think it's Vance or Rubio, or do you think the party tries to moderate and get away from MAGA and, gravitates towards someone like a Chris Christie, although I know he's covered in Trump stench, but, do you moderate the party and try to widen the tent?
We are in a ship all together. If this ship goes down, all of us are going to go down together, meaning that the Strait of Hormuz is either safe for everybody or nobody in the region.
Paul, we had that statement from Iran's Revolutionary Guard saying that if an attack on Lebanon does not end by Israel, a, quote, regretful response will face the, quote, aggressors in the region. We've only got about a minute left, but just very quickly, I want to talk to you about the impact that Lebanon is having with regard to these ceasefire negotiations, and to what extent is Israel could Israel use this ultimately possibly to derail these negotiations?
The possibility that there could be a spoiler for the ceasefire negotiations is one that keeps people up at night. It could be Israel in Lebanon. It could also be Iran or even elements within Iran. And certainly there's elements in Israeli society, as we've just seen in the previous report, who really want to have a stronger, firmer line and who view this as something as a betrayal. But that being said, it's unlikely that Israel is going to back off.
You are right, Sarah.
Prime Minister Netanyahu probably can't politically afford that. But if Iran wants to end this war, which has also been devastating for Iran, I think that eventually there's going to have to be some sort of accommodation made for this.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. That's Paul Musgrave, Tanya Thafa, and Sina Azuri. We appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
I saw that.
Israeli forces have killed.
Yeah, because Massey wants to release the Epstein files, right? Wants them all released.
In Western Gaza.
So it makes him a bad guy in Trump's eyes.
For our sister channel, the airstrike caused the car he was traveling in to burst into flames. Gaza's government media office says 262 journalists have been killed since Israel's war began in 2023. Well, Al Jazeera Media Network has issued a statement. It says the network strongly condemns the heinous crime of targeting and killing Al Jazeera Mubasher correspondent Mohammed Wisha following a strike on the vehicle in which he was traveling west of the Gaza Strip. This constitutes a new and flagrant violation of all international laws and norms. It reflects a continued systematic policy of targeting journalists and silencing the voice of truth. Ibrahim Al-Khalili is joining us live now from Gaza City. What more do we know about what happened, Ibrahim?
Yes, what was meant to be a ceasefire for Palestinians here across Gaza Strip has turned into a tragedy as a recent Israeli attack targeted a car and killed a Palestinian journalist, Mohammed Wishah, working for Al Jazeera Mubashir, and fire erupted in his car and he was transported to Al Shifa Hospital. And this is not the first time this happened. The Israeli military previously targeted Al Jazeera's Anas Al Sharif, Mohammed Iqriqa, Ismail Al Ghul, alongside his cameraman Rami Al Rifi. And these ceasefire violations committed by the Israeli military are ongoing here in the besieged Gaza Strip. We're talking also about Hussam Shabat, who was targeted and was working for Al Jazeera Mubashir. And these constant and ongoing Israeli attacks that target journalists underscores the growing fear for the safety of Palestinian journalists working here in the besieged Gaza Strip. After Mohammed was killed, the number of Palestinian journalists killed since the war began back in October 2023 to 262 Palestinian journalists. These attacks come amid thousands of ceasefire violations committed by the Israeli military, as the government media office reports that over 2,000 ceasefire violations committed by the Israeli military resulted in killing hundreds of Palestinians and injuring many more.
I agree, Sarah.
Ibrahim, thank you very much indeed. Ibrahim
Bernie
Al-Khalili
wouldn't
there
have.
talking to us from Gaza
Can't
City.
vote for him. He's too
Costa's
old.
next. We're going to be back in 30 minutes with more of our top stories. Stay with us.
All right, guys. 30 minutes left, then I'm out of here. Love you all. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm Scott McLean. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera. We're looking at the global economic impact of the war in the Middle East. Oil and gas flows from the Gulf to the rest of the world have effectively stopped because of restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz. Prices have shot up in Africa, which imports much of its energy from the Middle East. From Ethiopia to South Africa, governments are urging people to limit fuel use and avoid panic buying. Even Africa's largest oil producer, that's Nigeria, is feeling the strain. Petrol prices there have risen by 50%. Its largest refinery is ramping up production. Industry analysts say other African producers, like Angola, will benefit from higher crude prices in the short term, but the continent's oil and gas industry has suffered from years of underinvestment. So what are Africa's options to secure its energy needs? Well, the war in Iran has
Gaza's
created
a
an energy
disaster,
shock in Africa.
right, Sarah?
The continent relies heavily on oil and
It's
gas
just
imports
absolutely
from the Middle
disgusting.
East. Much of that is currently stuck on tankers near the Strait of Hormuz, which is effectively closed. Countries including Kenya, Ethiopia, and Zambia are reporting shortages. Others, like Namibia, are cutting fuel levies to offset soaring prices. Africa's largest oil refinery in Nigeria is pumping out crude at maximum capacity. That's 650,000 barrels every single day. And still, it is nowhere near enough to meet the continent's needs. and Africa's energy infrastructure needs money to modernize. So, what choices do governments have to contain the crisis? We have a panel of guests to discuss all of this in a moment, but first, this report by Laura Hahn.
Lights are dimmed and businesses shuttered early in Cairo, a city that rarely sleeps. Vital oil and gas supplies being cut off more than 2,000 kilometers east in the Strait of Hormuz is forcing the government
All this
into
chaos
taking
created by
exceptional
Bibi
measures,
and Trump,
including
two guys,
hiking fuel prices and switching off the lights.
have created a worldwide mess.
The decision affected sales by 60% because we were used to working at night. But now when a customer comes at 9, we would be closing.
Middle East energy shocks are now rippling across Africa.
Yeah, it's disturbing.
This is Lagos in Nigeria, another city plunged into darkness.
But
after
he'll never
petrol
suffer the
prices jumped
consequences
by
for his
50%
actions.
in a month. That's despite being home to Africa's largest petroleum refinery, Dangote, which has raised its ex-depot price by about 61% in 1 month. That's because Nigeria has been largely dependent on imported fuel as it lacks refinery capacity and strategic reserves.
I understand that the refinery,
They are poisoning this planet.
isn't getting sufficient volumes of crude here. So they need to also import crude, and that then means it adds to the cost. You know, those costs we are avoiding by locally refining. You still have to pay them if you have to bring in the crude you are going to refine.
In South Africa, the continent's most industrialized economy, authorities are warning of supply disruptions and panic buying.
We are experiencing a lot of shortage from a fuel. We only have 93 left. There is no 95 fuel for petrol. There's also no V-Power diesel in here. See, so it's so many difficulties here, so guys.
South Africa's Central Energy Fund estimates that petrol prices would need to jump 30% and wholesale diesel more than 50% to make up for the shortfall of fuel at the pumps. To offset this, the government is slashing petrol levies in April.
It's too hectic in terms of, because the petrol goes up, it means everything is going up, and the only person who will be suffering is us, the consumers.
And to cushion the blow of energy shocks, African nations are taking action. Namibia is slashing fuel levies, while Tanzania is strengthening border controls to prevent fuel smuggling. And Kenya says it will stabilize prices with a fixed tax levy. But businesses and the general public
Yes,
are
we'll
already
have pre-elections
feeling
in
the future
November.
across the continent. Nigeria
Trump
is
won't
a
like
huge
it,
market for app-based
but
taxi drivers.
it's gonna
They say
happen.
oil price hikes coupled with low fares and high commissions are leaving them shortchanged. All exposing just how quickly the war in Iran is translating into fragile energy systems and economic pain across Africa. Laura Khan for Counting the Costs, Al Jazeera.
All right, let's dive deeper into this. Joining us now from Dakar is Lena Sen. She's an economist and president of DCA, Developing Capital for Africa. That's an investment advisory firm. Joining us from London is Gavin Thompson. He is the vice chairman for energy in Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Wood Mackenzie, a global energy research group. And also in London is Veronica Bolton-Smith. She is the founder and CEO of the Critical Minerals Africa Group.
Hello,
and
Mary.
an investment and trade advisor to African governments.
Yeah,
Lena,
there's
let's start
there's
with you. We're
definitely going to
focused
be
on Africa
elections, man.
today, obviously. It is a diverse continent. Everybody is going to feel.
Well,
the
he might
impacts
try
of
to
this a little
manufacture
bit
something, but he
differently.
can't
on the
just
one hand, you
outright
have
stop
countries like, say,
elections. I mean, we had
Algeria,
elections
Libya,
during the Civil
Nigeria,
War,
and
so
Angola. These are
we're definitely going to have
oil-producing
elections.
countries. You also have countries that are almost entirely dependent on imports. So can we sort of divide Africa into winners and losers, or is everybody ultimately going to feel this?
Thank you so much for having me. I think what we're observing
You're welcome,
across
Jess.
the continent right now is a real pain that oil-producing countries and non-oil-producing countries are victim of. So what's happening is even a country like Senegal, which just started producing oil in 2024, it's still early in the stage of production to be able to benefit from it. But what we're seeing right now is across the board, not just oil-producing countries, the pain is felt across the board.
Okay.
And this is where I think, this is where what's very important. Country like Senegal, the president Diomaye Faye said we need to focus on fiscal discipline.
And we keep funding them, Viking.
And try to reduce
every year.
as much as possible.
Send them tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the solutions.
We feed their military. We feed their existence. We gave them their country.
You're the energy guys. So the International Energy Agency, according to them,
they're running the show.
Africa produces 8% of the world's crude oil, but only refines 2% of it. So help us explain where the disconnect is between oil production and refining capacity.
Yeah, it's really as simple as that. You know, there is a lack of domestic refining capacity across the continent. in your report, you mentioned Nigeria producing around 650,000 barrels a day from the Dangote refinery. You know, that's a fraction of Africa's requirements for refined products that are really key to the economic activity across the continent. Products like diesel for transportation, which is essential to ensure robust supply chains, food security, and so forth. So whilst Africa is producing in excess of 7 million barrels a day of crude oil, not uniformly across the continent, a number of big producers, much of that is exported. And then even those big producers,
the Dow is not up 5,000 points today.
Refined products. So you get an imbalance between the domestic production profile and the import profile.
I agree,
of
Viking.
Refined products.
So given that Nigeria has that Dangote refinery, given that it places restrictions on exports, are you surprised that they are still seeing inside of Nigeria a 50% rise in the price of petrol at the pump?
No, not surprised. Nigeria is the big oil producer in Africa, but it's still only one country of more than 50. And so, I think if we look at the continent as a whole, you see a real serious
what state is that,
around,
William?
Supply deficit. And
tell me so I can tell you you're full of shit.
And as prices ramp up, that feeds through to the pump and to consumers, and these very price-sensitive consumers. Secondly, it's not just about higher prices, it's actually about the availability of refined products, because the market globally is much tighter. African countries are competing globally for a
what state, William?
Supply of refined
Before I kick you out of here.
And price wins out in these situations. And so it's not only Africa trying to meet its needs, it's competing with Europe, with Asia, and other parts of the world. And that's creating a real tightness in the supply and inevitably knocking through into higher prices for consumers.
Yeah, of course, without protectionist measures, you're sort of at the whims of the global market, which is setting the prices here. Veronica, let's talk about the solution. So you're seeing countries like South Africa, say, removing fuel taxes to try to make things a bit more affordable for people. You're seeing countries like
made them
Egypt,
go away,
instance,
Leo.
putting curfews on businesses. You
just a troll or a bot.
I wonder if you were advising a government in Africa today, what would you tell them that they should be doing right now to try to make things easier for people?
Gosh, what an excellent question. And also thank you for having me. Ultimately, it comes down to mitigating risks. And I think Africa has, what this crisis is showing us is just how vulnerable it is to, its global supply chain and Africa's position in that. I think one of the things that we advise as the Critical Minerals Africa Group is to ensure that Africa really has cheap, reliable power. It's investing in its transmission and distribution and the grid to enable, off-grid solutions, also to add to the grid itself for manufacturing, for processing. It also needs to invest in its infrastructure. I mean, things like travel, roads will be highly impacted by what's happening here. Obviously, fuel prices will be going up, so moving goods across Africa will be challenging, but even more so because the infrastructure is so poor. So investing in that kind of long-term, the fundamentals, as we call it, in water infrastructure, in infrastructure itself, and in the energy infrastructure, it will be very vital for the future. And I think as well, we need to make sure that we're investing in people, the skills that the continent really requires to ensure that we can create those markets within Africa. So yes, we want to export out, but we also want to make sure that we're trading internally. So to strengthen those kind of cross-border opportunities and strengthen the opportunities to trade with one another, and to have that kind of regional approach when thinking about how to create value chains. So when advising governments, we look at sort of the whole picture. Energy plays a key role in that.
But I mean, these are all long-term solutions to the problem, but I wonder, just to make things easier today, I mean, is there really a good answer to this question as to what governments can do beyond just telling people, hey, try to reduce your fuel consumption if you can?
I think, yeah, it's a good question. Short-term sort of opportunities will really come down to whether governments are able to attract investment. And I think that is a short, medium and a long-term play. Short-term, it needs to think about where it plays a role in supporting other countries, neighbouring countries, increasing that kind of intra-trade, as I've mentioned already. And I think also just strengthening its economic power by looking at opportunities to support growth of economic growth across regions, economic growth across the continent as well. So yeah, I think in the short term, it's about making sure that you can create value nearer to home, as well as looking at how to do that abroad.
Lena, these kind of business curfews that we're seeing in Egypt, removing taxes on fuel, which some countries are doing in Africa, are these Band-Aid solutions, or can these be in place for a longer period of time, you think?
I think this situation really shows the vulnerability of our economies. We depend too much on external factors that we cannot control. So I think what she said is very much on point. Our economies on the continent need to find solutions to rely on themselves together. So I think regional integration is extremely important. We cannot continue to be dependent on external sources, and the strength can be found on the ground. We have the resources, we have the human resources, we have the natural resources, but we just need to have a better cohesion and organization in order to avoid being in this trap of global shocks.
Yeah, Lena, I wonder if you can give me a little bit of context on the human impact here. According to the UN, some 600 million people, that is almost half the population of the entire continent of Africa, lack reliable access to electricity, and yet they are still somehow feeling the impact of these rising fuel prices. What do you think the impact will be on Africa's poorest citizens?
Well, I'm going to be just very specific. Take agriculture as a sector, which is a huge sector, obviously extremely important. According to the World Bank, April 2026 food security update, the global urea price surged 46% month on month between February and March. So that tells you how catastrophic it is for our farmers to deal with this crisis. So and 45 million people, that's according to the World Food Program. 45 million people can be pushed into acute hunger by mid-2026.
Yeah.
These are numbers, these are facts.
Yeah, obviously a huge concern. I want to show our viewers a graphic from the International Energy Agency, which illustrates the point that it seems all of you are trying to make and the difficulty that Africa is really facing. So if you go back to the year 2000, Africa was a net exporter of oil. Fast forward, almost a quarter century later, exports have dropped 12%, imports have surged more than 300%. So Gavin, I wonder, in your view, why has this happened, and was there something that African governments could or ought to have done to prevent it?
Well, it's a real challenge. I think when you look at African oil and gas reserves, so both proven and yet to be discovered. You know, we see Africa, of course, it's a major hydrocarbon producer. It has world-class discovered oil and gas resources and probably more to come. Attracting the capital and creating the appropriate regulatory and fiscal environments to stimulate investment in that has been a real challenge. It's been a challenge for decades. We are seeing governments making progress. You know, Nigeria's production is ramping up. It has set targets for 2 million barrels a day of production by 2027, 3 million barrels a day by 2030. You mentioned Angola. Generally speaking, the country has incentives for incremental production and development of marginal fields. But these increases take time. They're not going to be a response to this current crisis. What they may do is they may accelerate action by governments, regulators to ensure that African producers like Nigeria, Angola, and others remain super competitive in the global upstream industry. But that takes time. It takes months and years to see that come through. So we're not going to see some immediate resolution to this current crisis through domestic production.
Gavin, I just want to ask you quickly about South Africa, if we can focus in on that country for a minute. So they have had a number of oil refineries actually decommissioned or mothballed in recent years. Is it realistic to maybe restart those refineries in South Africa, or is it not going to make a difference because they still rely on crude oil imports from elsewhere to actually supply those refineries?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. You know, the real challenge is crude at the moment in the market, the availability of that crude, the price of that crude, and taking a decommissioned refinery and bringing it back into production again. You know, this is not a quick process. There's the engineering, there's the safety, there's the resourcing, the human resource to bring that online, as well as supply chains. I think it may lead governments to reassess their energy security more fundamentally, so that their broader energy security, how do they respond to supply shocks in the future? But I don't see that as a short-term solution to the current crisis.
Yeah, Veronica, you talked about lack of investment, and perhaps a good case in point here is Ethiopia, which relies almost entirely on energy imports from abroad. Obviously, it is having a ripple effect throughout the entire economy. There are some oil and gas reserves in Ethiopia, clearly, though, not enough. Do you think that Ethiopia or the government there should have been more prepared? Do you think that it was reasonable for them to expect that a historically pretty stable region like the Gulf would always be there for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's not just Ethiopia. I think the continent-wide, the mitigation of potential risks hasn't been really well thought out. I think we're seeing that play currently now when we think about that. As I mentioned, the energy infrastructure, we haven't invested very well in our transmission and distribution lines. We haven't invested in our infrastructure of people skills. You know, there's so much there that, you know, Africa, I think, needs to use this opportunity. It's a crossroads. So I think it needs to think about, you know, going forward. We saw this definitely with COVID, you know, the impact that COVID had on global supply chains, but how it impacted Africa significantly.
No, the chat's popping off again.
It's not just about kind of a short-term fix and thinking, how can we weather the storm on
Get
this
him, Zach.
occasion, but long-term, how can we play a role in terms of attracting investors amidst this global crisis? And how do we strengthen Africa's position as a serious player in terms of utilizing the natural resources that it has, investing in sovereign wealth funds to then reinvest back into infrastructure and everything else, and so that we're not subject to you know, these crises really having a huge effect on the continent as we're seeing now. So I think it's about using this as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to change the way that we are currently doing things. You know, I think Ethiopia can't be blamed for that. A lot of us have been foul of that on the continent, but it's how we use it now, and thinking about that sort of 20, 30-year vision where we want to see Africa playing a role.
So, Lena, it is not just the Gulf, obviously, that is producing oil, but you also have Iranian oil in this situation. Obviously, U.S. sanctions and the threat of blowback from the United States has prevented a lot of African economies from buying Iranian oil. Do you think that more countries may look at the situation and say, look, this is our best option? Do you think that some will opt to buy Iranian oil regardless of the blowback from the United States?
I think the situation we're living right now is really historic. I think we now understand that we're all vulnerable to one another. And I think right now, Africa has a perfect opportunity to attract more investments because everyone believed in the stability of the Gulf countries for the longest time. And now we understand that they have their own vulnerability. Who thought that Dubai or Doha would be in this position today? So I think right now, I believe that the African countries need to take action and position themselves as a destination for international investors. I think Iran is a country that has shown its resilience. I think that the United States has shown its vulnerability. And I think we need to take act of what is happening and make decisions that will allow us to benefit as much as possible for our people.
Yeah, and I certainly hear the message that all of you are trying to convey, that Africa desperately needs further investment in its industry. But Gavin, I wonder, short term, which countries, if any, in Africa do you think are likely to be tempted to maybe go and buy oil from Iran?
It's a very difficult question to answer. You know, that would be very likely be government to government discussions. You know, the question may be how much spare Iranian supply is available. You know, China is by far the largest buyer of Iranian crude. And so you would be competing for a more limited amount of volume, but I'm not party to those conversations, those government conversations, so it would be only be able to speculate.
What about Russian oil, though? Obviously, there have been sanctions from the West placed on Russian oil. Do you think that Africa will be a bigger buyer of Russian?
Didn't Trump just remove sanctions on Russian oil?
And will that sort of deepen their influence on the continent?
Look, I think, you know, we've certainly seen from the White House that there has been a desire to minimize the upside in oil prices. That's a political position which the U.S. government takes. It doesn't want U.S. consumers exposed to high gasoline prices. And in parallel with that, you know, we've seen various measures announced that have allowed more Russian crude exports into the market. So that has been quite a public position. That most of that has, as we know, has been going to India and to China. But if more is available and African buyers are interested in that, then no, I wouldn't be surprised if some Russian volumes go into Africa. But this may be a short-term measure, so I don't know if I'd necessarily draw the line between Russian influence in Africa and the short-term supply of Russian crude.
Certainly a fair point. Veronica, let me ask you about the oil-producing countries in Africa. Angola, Nigeria, Libya, Algeria are the biggest ones. Is now the time to sort of cash in on the rising price of oil and gas, or is now the time to actually restrict what goes outside their borders to make sure that their own citizens have enough and don't have to deal with these rising prices?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think ultimately what we want to see is
you're going to have to deal with the rising prices anyway. It's a global commodity.
Who are
doesn't matter if you keep it for yourself.
An increase in sales. Use that money to then reinvest back into the country, i.e. subsidies. I think it's important to recognise that the cost, the average cost of food, of fuel, etc., for the average person is going to go up significantly. So any ways that government can help reduce those costs for the consumer will be, I think, will be felt well and received well. I think also, there are opportunities to also look at how, you can create sovereign wealth funds. So investing in those things, as I've mentioned already, to invest in those infrastructure and energy opportunities. But I think, in the short term, medium term, it would be good if these countries could then reinvest and also look at how they can bring costs down for the consumer.
All right, Veronica Bolton-Smith, Gavin Thompson, and Lena Sen. It's a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's our show for this week. You can get in touch with us on X. My handle is @ScottMcLean. And make sure to use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or drop us an email counting the...
All right, guys, thank you all very much for joining today. I appreciate it. Thank you for liking and subscribing. If you haven't already, please do so. And I will be back again tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Love you all. Catch you later. Bye.